Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Arlington Board of Selectmen for December 4th, 2017. We are meeting at approximately 7:15 p.m. in the Selectmen's Chambers on the second floor of Town Hall, Massachusetts Avenue in Arlington, Massachusetts. My name is Joseph Curo. You can tell from the sign I just pushed it off. And I am joined here by our very able staff, Ms. Kropelka, our board administrator, Mr. Heim, Town Council, Mr. Chapdelaine, Town Manager, the Dean of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Grilli, Kevin Grilli, Diane Mahan, Dan Dunn, and it very much pains me for the last time to introduce our Vice Chair, Stephen Byrne, for whom this is his last meeting. I think a lot of us know the passage from Ecclesiastes to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. And Stephen has had a season of many life changes. I know we all congratulated him on his recent marriage to a very wonderful woman and his recent job change and his advances in his career. So we're very saddened to see you go, Steve. Now, we are going to have a formal, I know all of your colleagues are chomping at the bit to say something, but we are going to have in the coming several meetings a formal ceremonial, if you'll grace us with your presence again, where we would like to toast you, maybe roast you just a little bit, and make some more formal presentations. But I could not, in good conscience, let you leave here with no token of appreciation. So this is a bit seasonal, I have to admit. I'd like to present you with this nutcracker, which is a testament to all of the leisure time you're going to have. You'll see it has a golf club, a golf ball, a golf sweater, and hat. And if you're ever missing this chamber, like all good politicians, it has a fully working mouth. Work at all times. So that's just a small token of appreciation. I'm going to have you back for a much more formal presentation. And I don't know if you'd like to say a few words. I understand that you're going to excuse yourself towards the end of the meeting. We talk about future dates and future business. But,
I'm happy to say a few words. And thank you very much, Joe. That is too funny. As Joe mentioned, tonight's going to be my final meeting as a member of the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to participate up until agenda item number 11, when the board discusses its future meetings and a process for how to fill a vacant seat. It's really been an honor and a privilege to serve as a member of this board. We don't always agree, but I think that we're really good at listening to each other. We're good at hearing where each other are coming from, and I think that we always vote in a way that we think is best for our community and best for the residents who live here. And I think that's a really special thing for a board to work together so well, and with five people with different backgrounds and different interests professionally and different things that they're really committed to in town. I think it's been a really collaborative effort that we've all undertaken over the past 5.5 years. Thank you to the board staff, of course, Marie, Marianne, Fran, and Ashley. None of the work that we do every other Monday would ever get done without you. So thank you. You're like a family to me. Thank you. Town staff, of course. I think everyone who works for the town, shows up every single day and works to their best of their ability to serve the residents of Arlington. They're incredibly dedicated. I think they are the best municipal employees throughout the Commonwealth. And as residents, we're incredibly lucky to have them and lucky that they chose Arlington to work. Adam and Doug, thank you for your friendship, guidance. I've relied on you many times. I've learned a lot from you. and that's something I'll certainly take with me. So I will miss sitting here on Monday nights and really being part of this group of dedicated employees who love Arlington. I'll remember our debates, our laughter, being able to formally thank people for choosing Arlington, whether or not they bring samples, Mr. Greeley. Maybe someone might at some point down the road. I don't know. I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. But some of my earliest memories are spending time with Marie in the Inspectional Services Department. And, sorry, but no, I grew up here in Arlington. It's been a real pleasure and honor to serve. And I am incredibly grateful for having the opportunity to do so. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll see you back here in a little bit, so
Yes.
prepare yourself.
God bless you. God bless you.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Gurley, sure.
I know, shut up, Kevin, because we're gonna bring Stephen back, and now that he has me all choked up. But it's, this has been exceptional service from the youngest person ever to be elected to this Board of Selectmen. But I also feel quite emotional about losing you, buddy.
Thank you.
I'll shut up now, Joe.
It's okay.
We're saving the good stuff for
Saving the
later,
good
so
stuff.
don't think.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So now we move on to the consent agenda. All items will be, the vote on this will be taken generally with one vote and minimal discussion. First item, vote, Chapter 268A, Section 20B3, Contract Certification, Michael Rademacher, Director, Department of Public Works, table from 11/2017 meeting. Request special one-day beer and wine license 12/30/17 at Robbins Memorial Town Hall for private event Heather Hawks. Request special one-day beer and wine license 12/31/17 at Robbins Memorial Town Hall for private event Judy Femia. And vote loading zone time change, Alton Street, Officer Corey Rateau, Traffic and Parking Unit. Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
I have a motion by Ms. Mahan. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dunn. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any of these matters? Seeing none, on motion by Ms. Mahan, second by Mr. Dunn, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It's unanimously adopted. We now move on to, well, are we at 7:30? We advertised for 7:30, right?
7:45.
We've got 5 minutes.
5 minutes, sorry, I think we advertised 7:30, so we're
Yes.
gonna have to jump ahead. So we move on to licenses and permits. Request for Tango Restaurant late night event, 12/31/17 to 1/1/18. Tango Restaurant, 464 to 466 Massachusetts Avenue. Ricardo Mermet is, yeah, come on up. Come on up and please step to the mic, introduce yourself, and just tell us what you want to do.
Melissa Sherman, actually, I just got married, so
Oh.
no longer Mermet. Tango Restaurant, yeah, we just wanted to see if we could extend our license for the 31st again this year, so that our diners can stay a little bit later to celebrate the new year.
Yeah, and I know you've done this several years in a row. How many years has it been now?
4,
Four?
maybe?
Okay. Any of my colleagues have any questions or comments on the request?
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Greeley,
Second?
second by Mr. Byrne. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much, and
you.
good luck with your event.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Next, we have a request for Douay Restaurant Late Night Event, 12/31/17 and 1/1/18. Douay, 190 Massachusetts Avenue, Wayne Dupre. Is Wayne here? No. Okay, come on. Up to the mic. Hi.
Hey, Wayne.
This is actually a very exciting time for us because it's we're trying to host a New Year's Eve party, but it's a little bit more than that. It's also an anniversary party because we opened on New Year's Eve of last year. So we're trying to just do a little dinner and dancing just beyond the midnight for a 1-hour extension.
Okay, great. Do we have any, have a motion?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Dunn.
Second?
Second?
Second by Mr. Greeley. Do we have any further questions or comments? Mr. Dupre? No? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimously approved. Yeah, good luck with your event. Thank you. Congratulations on your anniversary. Okay. I think the next one could be a lengthy discussion. Let's see if we got something quick here. No,
Really isn't, so.
really isn't. Other than citizens' open forum. I guess we could move to citizens' open forum. So move to citizens' open forum. Except in unusual circumstances, any matter presented for consideration of the board shall neither be acted upon nor a decision made the night of the presentation in accordance with the policy under which the open forum was established. It should be noted that there is a 3-minute time limit to present a concern or request.
Excuse me, sorry.
Mr. Loretti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Loretti, 56 Adams Street. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the property at 75 Decatur Street. Some people may know this as the former site of the Decatur Market. Now a 3-unit townhouse is being built there. I believe the building permit for this townhouse was improperly granted. 3-unit house, and for the simple reason that 3-unit townhouses are not allowed in an R2 zoning district. The prior non-conforming use was a store within a 2-family home, but that was abandoned, and thus only permitted uses are allowed to get building permits within that zoning district. Even if the store had not been abandoned, the building department itself has no authority whatsoever to permit another non-conforming use, such as this townhouse. In addition, the building that's being constructed there is over 5,500 square feet. It's on a lot of just 4,500 square feet, and it violates a number of the dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw. The grandfathering that is claimed only applies to 1- and 2-family homes, not for townhouses like the one that's being constructed there. I'm sure some of you are aware that I met with the town manager several weeks ago to discuss this. The meeting followed a public records request I made that showed that the applicant for the permit at this site provided no documentation supporting that a townhouse could be built there, a 3-unit townhouse. The documentation the building department itself provided does not support the permitting of this townhouse. I have yet to hear back from the town manager on about what the town plans to do about this. So I presume that's at the direction of one or more members of your board. So I'm here tonight to ask what your board is going to do about this. And if your answer is nothing, then my question is, what do the residents of the town of Arlington have to do to ensure that the zoning bylaw is enforced honestly as written for everyone? Do we need to go to the State Board of Building Regulations and Standards? Do we need to ask the State Ethics Commission to investigate? Because I think, as you know, the developer in this case is a former town official. The developer's son-in-law is a member of the Board of Selectmen. The selectman's father is the building commissioner, and the building commissioner's wife and the selectman's mother has served as a real estate agent for this developer and is likely to do the same for this development after it gets constructed.
1 minute, Mr. Loretti.
Or do we need to appeal the granting of the building permit in state court, or perhaps some combination of all three? I realize it's not your policy to respond to issues the evening that they are brought before you, but I will look forward to hearing a response to this matter, for it will determine my future actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for Citizens Open Forum? No one on the list? No one else? Thank you very much. Citizens Open Forum is now closed. We're now at 7:31, and we will return to item 5 on the agenda. First is a vote on the MWRA debt shift, and the second is a discussion and vote on the property tax classification tax rate. Mr. Tierney, are you and Mr. Feely presenting both of these? No. The manager?
So I'll start with
Okay.
with A, excuse me, sorry. So under A on this hearing, this is simply a procedural vote for the board to take before setting the tax classification. This would be a vote required by the Department of Revenue for the board to set the MWRA debt shift at the amount it's been set at for, I believe, a decade now, $5,593,112. What this does, as the board understands, is shifts that exact amount which pertains to MWRA debt that we pay through our water and sewer enterprise fund on to the tax rate, and that was a policy decision made by a prior board, again, probably some better part of 10 or 15 years ago. So to functionally, again, make that debt shift, the board needs to take a vote. I will mention, I do understand that this board has taken votes and set goals in the past for us to look at reducing that debt shift over time. as the board looks at future operating overrides and debt exclusions related to the high school to be able to mitigate the impact to the tax rate, and that's something that we are prepared to begin analyzing, or we have begun analyzing, and we're prepared to begin making recommendations as we go forward.
Great. Before I call on members of the public, do any of the members of the board have questions for the manager? Mr. Dunn?
I guess opinion rather than question. I don't know. Just that I definitely do look forward to the day where we can, where we write a budget that lowers this debt shift. I don't think it makes policy sense, and inflation is slowly whittling it down, but I want to be more aggressive than that.
Okay, anything else before we call on members of the public? I will just, before we do that, I'll just echo Mr. Dunn's sentiment. I know that we have discussed this in our goals meetings, and we do look forward to that, even if we do it on a schedule over a number of years. I think that ultimately it will make absolute sense to do this, especially as we're taking on new school projects and such. I think that by getting rid of the debt shift, the impact is to benefit those with smaller families. So I think it's a reasonable trade-off. I saw Mr. Jameson's hand.
Oh, my gosh.
Thank you, good.
I'm Mrs. Mahan. Thank you. No, you never addressed me, so I figured I'd let you know my name. Thanks. What? You never addressed me, so I was letting you know my name. Thank you. I know you do. You never addressed me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Should we look at this before we look at that recommended by our Board of Assessors?
No, we're doing the first page first, and I'll come back for the last 3 pages afterwards.
This is about the tax levy limit.
Yeah, we're on
Oh,
the
I'm going
debt
to refer
shift.
you to Part 2C of the first page, Mr. Greeley. It's about the debt shift. I'm going to speak to the debt shift, which is the subject of matter before the board. Yes? Mr.
That is
Curro?
the subject. That is the subject before us.
Ms. Mahan?
Please, if you could address the debt shift.
Okay, so as longstanding members and those who have been watching the Board of Selectmen, this is an issue that I've had an interest in a long time, and in part through discussions with the board over the years. The reason, while Ms. LaCourte was on the board, she suggested the compromise, rather than getting rid of it, to fix it at the number that it is now. And so that's where we come up with the number that we have now. Just want to, I applaud the discussion that happened ahead by the board, and I think last year as well, that several of you are looking towards removing this. It could come in handy when we have to float the high school bond issue as a move something here. My biggest concern about the existence of this as part of the tax bill is that, well, it was initially put on the taxes so people could deduct it from their federal returns, but that may be going by the wayside if current legislation goes through Congress. Second of all, so if you have two houses and one's valued at $500,000 and one's valued at $1 million, and they both have two occupants, the person who has the house with $1 million pays twice the amount of the debt shift as the person who has $500,000. And it also, so that's, I think, doesn't really reflect usage, assuming they use the same amount of water. The other issue at hand is that the rates that we charge for water are artificially low for the actual cost of delivering the water, because people, when they get their bills from water and sewer, which you very astutely moved to quarterly system, it's actually, the cost of the water is actually more, so it doesn't drive conservation. And if we don't drive conservation at a level equivalent to or greater than our corresponding other members of the MWRA communities, we will end up bearing more debt because we haven't kept our usage restricted. So as far as a conservation issue and keeping our costs on the debt down, I think it would be better at length, as suggested by the board, to potentially remove it from the tax bill. The last thing I discovered by chance, because I'm getting older and I was looking at the Form 1, by having it in the tax bill, there's a circuit breaker aspect of the circuit breaker for people over 65. Not quite there yet, but soon, where they can deduct 50% of their water and sewer bill as part of some formula that calculates the circuit breaker for seniors. So it specifically says that Arlington and other communities that do this, that people are not able to do that. So looking forward, that will also be something I think of use. And I'll get back to the last 3 pages after the presentation by the Board of Assessors.
Thank you, Mr. Jamieson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this, speak to the debt shift? Hearing none, do I have a motion on the floor?
Move approval.
Motion by Mr. Dunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Byrne. Any further discussion or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the recommended MWA debt shift of $5,593,112?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It is unanimous. We now move on to discussion and vote property tax classification tax rate. Paul Tierney, Director of Assessments, and Kevin Feely, Chair of the Board of Assessors. Mr. Feely.
Good evening.
Welcome.
This is our annual visit to talk about classification, classification only. So with me this evening are my 2 fellow board members, Mary Stanley and Robert Greeley. And we have 2 staff members, Paul Tierney and Dana Mann. Paul has done all the work on the figures, so I'm going to let him go ahead and walk you through the booklet.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I begin, I would just like to acknowledge the Board of Assessors, Kevin Feely, Robert Greeley, Mary Winstanley O'Connor, for the support and help throughout the year, as well as my outstanding staff, Mary McMakin, Ellen Kelly, and Dana Mann. So without further ado.
Of the 3 members of the board, which is the weakest? Well, you don't
I understand your question.
I guess you don't have to answer that, but I thought you told me earlier it was my brother, but I'm not sure. No, sorry, go ahead, Paul.
You might be misremembering. Before I begin, we do have one correction. We found today that there was a slight error in the school debt exclusion, so we did correct that, and everyone has a correct booklet now. Okay. So we're going to calculate the FY18 levy limit. We take last year's levy limit, add 2.5% growth, add 2.5% plus new growth. We come up to the 2018 levy limit of $109,965,991. We had the school debt exclusion, water and debt sewer, and we come up to a maximum total to be raised of $117,340,507. We need to raise $117,255,201. Divide that by the total taxable assessed value in town, and we come out to multiply that by 1,000. We come out to a new tax rate proposed of $12.13. Move on to page 2, the minimum residential factor computation. We can raise the share of the levy for class 3 to 150%. We turn to page 3, it shows those numbers back over there. And on to page 4, gives a breakdown of what the tax impact would be if we did split the rate. If we did 5%, commercial and industrial would rise by $303. Residential would save $19.24. We went all the way up to 150%. Commercial, industrial, personal property would see an increase of $3,033. Residential and open space would see a savings of $192.44. Page 5 is just a break, over the years, the tax rates that we've had. Page 6, see LA4, just list of property, parcel counts and valuations for all the properties in town with their class. Page 7, the LA13, breaks down the abatements granted throughout the year, as well as gives us our new growth number in the lower right-hand corner. Okay. Page 9. This page gives us FY 18 values versus FY 17 values. If you look in the middle, gives you the breakdown of what has risen and what has not. Overall, values have gone up 7.86% across the board.
When you say 7.8%,
That's
7.86% across the board, is that residential or everywhere?
everything, everything combined.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Page 10 is just our pie chart. Shows the amount of taxes we do have to collect and the impact on the debt exclusion and the MWRA debt. Page 11 is tax rate components. Just shows, breaks down the taxes by levy base, 2.5%, growth, override, water and sewer debt exclusion. It also gives us our average value of home, average taxes, the new tax rate.
Okay, thank you. And then page 12.
Page 12.
It's self-explanatory.
Yep, just breaks down what average single-family homes are being taxed in neighboring towns.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Tierney. Do members of the board have questions or comments for Mr. Tierney? Ms. Mahan?
This is my naivete, and, this is not my expertise or background. So in the pure sense of asking the question, the total average increase, when I look at, when I look at 2017 at 5.15%, and then 2018 at 7.98%, is that a true and set number, or is that just purely a projection? Like, my thing is I'm looking at the differences between the two numbers, because we go from 2014, 2 to 5 to 9 to 5 to 7.98. So I just don't understand how that works out.
Sorry, what page you on?
I'm on page 11. If I look at the, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from the bottom, the total average percent increase, and then you list 2014 to 2018. I'm just wondering if you can just explain to me the 5.15%, 2017, which I assume that's an actual number.
Correct.
And the 7.98%, I'm saying how factual or strong is that 7.98%, or where did that number derive from?
It came from all the properties. If you add them all up, that's the increase of all classes of property. From singles, condominiums, apartment buildings, commercial, which was on page, 9, I believe.
And my only question is, and it's something I would not understand, is, you start back in 2014 at 2.45, and 15 is at 5.3, 16 is 9.5, and then we come to 17. I'm just wondering, what is that fluctuation? Is that, it is what it is, or?
It's what the prices are going for at that particular time, market value.
Okay, thank you. That's the only number I didn't understand. I apologize. That's
No
me,
worries.
not you. It's me, not you.
Thank you.
Thank
Any of my
you.
other colleagues have questions or comments? No. I would just point out a few things for folks who might not be looking along with this, just a couple things, and I'm going to count on Mr. Tierney to keep me honest here. Sure. If I misstate anything. This is actually the fourth year in a row that our tax rate has gone down, which does not mean that folks don't see their taxes, their tax amount go up. And based on the information that's provided here, it looks like the average amount of increase on a single-family home is $155 under the proposal before us. And obviously, your mileage may vary based on the assessment of your home, and the data that we have here actually shows the relative rates of growth between different types of property. It looks like the growth in value on condos is far outstripping that. It's about 3 times the growth rate in assessed value as that on single-family homes, based on what we have before us. 2 other, I think, salient points I took looking at this is, one, I do always appreciate, that's why I pointed out page 12. We get a lot out of, for our money here in town. Our average single-family home taxes paid are in some cases, they're just over half of some of our immediate neighbors here. So this is actually instructive, and I think that that's a testament to the financial leadership in the town, that we are able to do that year after year. The last thing is that, as we all know, because we take this vote every year and we have this discussion every year, the question that's actually before us is whether or not we're going to classify the tax rate and shift some of the burden to our businesses as opposed to residential. Currently, we tax all at the same rate. The percent residential is 94%, the percentage share of our assessed value in town. Commercial is only about 4.5%, and the rest made up by industrial and personal property. And Mr. Dunn seems like he wants to jump in on that.
No, I wanted to be.
I just wanted to note that in the past, and there isn't a motion on the table, but in the past, this board has declined to classify and do any differential rate increases, just because the negative impact on commercial property would far outstrip any positive impact realized by residential taxpayers. I just throw out those salient points because not everybody has this in front of you, although I believe if it's not up on the website yet, it will be. Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting.
No
I was
problem.
trying to signal that I had something to say, and I did not mean to interrupt.
Very good.
Nicely done. So page 11, I realized there was one thing I wanted to just point out. So on page 11, which is the multi-year comparison, if you go down about halfway down the left-hand side, it says max levy prior year, then it says the 2.5%, and then it says growth. And in particular, I want people to think about the 2.5% and the growth looking across, because those two numbers are that's what is the increase in our revenue, absent a few other smaller factors like state money. And usually, I think, and most of the time when we budget, we expect that 2.5 number to come in because we know how to multiply 2.5% times the old number, and we can predict that one with a fair degree of accuracy. But the growth number is where it's harder to predict, but it's also that, and it is also a lot bigger over these years that we're looking at than it used to be. And that is the teardowns and the renovations and the floor adds and the rebuilds and the lot subdivisions and so on and so forth. That's what's driving that number. And so if you look at the numbers that we were getting, in 07 and 08, that number would have been, in the few hundred thousand, like 200,000, 400,000, something like that. And the fact that it has gone from 200,000 to 1.2 million, that's one of the big levers that has helped us avoid an override over the last few years. And so I say that both because on the good side, we've avoided an override in places that we really would have otherwise thought that we had one. But it also is a little bit of a cautionary tale that, the economy at least doesn't grow forever, at least it never has yet. And there's going to be another recession, and when it does, that number is going to plummet, and then we're going to be looking at a growth pressure, a budget pressure that's not being solved by growth like it is right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I should also note, I think it's timely to note, and it was alluded to in our earlier discussion on this hearing, that under the, if I'm not mistaken, the current version of federal legislation that was passed by the U.S. Senate the other night, I believe caps property tax deductions at $500,000. The mortgage sizes,
Mortgage
I'm sorry,
500, I think it's
and,
10K.
but it also, it also impacts deductibility of local and state taxes. I'm not sure how many people would be netted in that, and that's subject to change, but, yeah.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the two figures, 500,000 and/or $10,000
Yeah.
in tax issue. So they're going to cap how much you can deduct.
Yeah.
I think that's in the Senate bill, and I think the other $500,000 figure is in the House bill. So those
Yeah, I
are-
think the 500,000, I think had to do with mortgage size, and that's interest, but there are limits that are in there on deductibility of property tax, local taxes as well. Probably won't net too many people, but it could, depending on what comes out. Okay.
One other question, again, to educate me. On page 11, under water sewer debt service, it appears from 2014 to 2018, that's the only, I guess, fixed cost. I'm just wondering why from 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, it's the exact same number at 5.5 plus million.
The value, good.
And it's for my edification, it's not, that's the only thing that I look at all these things, that every other number changes, and that's been a fixed cost from 2014, so if you could just explain that to
Yeah,
me.
sure. So the statute that allows a town to shift MWRA or water sewer-related debt onto the tax rate allows you to shift the entirety of whatever that debt might be onto the tax rate. So prior to the 2004 operating override, the policy of the town was to escalate the amount that was being shifted to match up with the debt service as it escalated. So you would have seen at that time an increasing amount of debt service. Now, the debt service that the town pays through the Water Sewer Enterprise Fund to the MWRA is significantly in excess of that $5.5 million figure. But before the 2004-2005 operating override, a prior board voted to cap it at 5.5 to sort of stabilize the impact it was having on the tax rate. So it's been capped at that amount ever since. That's why it stays the same.
So that's an actual number.
That is
That's the max, that's the most it can be. Like, my question is it more, is it less, or has it been that
debt
way
is-
since 2014?
The debt is more. We pay more debt to the MWRA than that figure. This is how much we support on the tax rate. The remainder of that debt is supported via water sewer rates.
Okay.
How the 5593112 was settled on 12 years ago, I do not know.
I believe it was literally copy and paste.
Yeah.
They said, I think
That's,
they said 0.0 increase, and that's going to be it.
All right, we'll talk about that another day. Thank you. I just saw that anomaly. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments by my colleagues? Anything more to your presentation? No? Good. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your work on this. Anyone else wishing to speak to the public hearing? Mr. Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Curro. I can tell you, because I was here when it was, when the 5.592 was proposed by Ms. LaCourte. That was what it was for that year, and they decided they were going to cap that. And I had a discussion with Ms. Winstanley O'Connor a couple years after that happened, and she remarked at that time that the number of people that were appealing their assessments had dropped drastically. And I think that, because what was happening was, while your water and sewer rates weren't going up, essentially, through the action of the debt shift increasing $500,000 every year, that extra amount was being shoved into the tax bill, so when people looked at their bills, they didn't make sense. And I think that some of our success with override since then is that people look at the bills, at least I do, and I can understand what I'm seeing on increases versus like, how come it's suddenly 7%? And that partially was because of the debt shift. So I think that's turned out well. I do have a question for Mr. Tierney. What is the overlay reserve this year?
Mr. Tierney, if you'd like to come to the mic.
If you might, just.
If you could
to
address
follow
your
up
questions
on-
through the chair, please.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
You asking in the totality?
The overlay reserve, it's budgeted normally at 600 or 800, but what was it actually after you did all the calculations? Did you have that number?
If you don't mind,
Sure.
I will. It should end just at about $1.1 million.
So that's even more better to Mr. Dunn's comment, because it was budgeted at, what, 8 because of the
I believe we were budgeted at 6 this
okay.
year.
So that extra 500 is also growth beyond projections. That's how that's captured that's the number that they use to do that. So what I wanted to comment on was the factor discussion that you're having now. And the Fiscal Resource Task Group monitors this and has been before you several times. Mr. Howard is with me this evening in the audience. On the second page of the handout I provided you is a history showing, and for those who are new staff-wise, the town of Arlington has had only 3 operating overrides in its history. And so we started this table with the first one in 1994. All the other things are debt exclusions, which pay for a structure, and then once they're paid off, they go away. So I had this updated for 2018 because you nicely provide this online, but I obviously printed out the wrong one. So if you look at the very bottom, you can see that if you look at at the very bottom, you'll see what I've done in the first series of numbers below the table is show what the new growth would be if it was equal among all classes, the residential, the commercial, industrial, and personal property and businesses, and the total, which is, so it's gone up 161% since 1994. So that means it's 100 plus 161. And just point to the value in the middle there, that the CIP assessment, if it had been equivalent across all things, would be 10.5 million. And that's as of 2017. It's very comparable for 18, but as I mentioned, I neglected to print out the correct form. The actuality is in the numbers below, where it's 171 for residential, 161 obviously for the whole, and only 63% growth in the tax revenues from CIP. So as Mr. Tierney went through through the board's report, I took that out of this year's thing, and discussion in the past has focused primarily on the largest potential shift, but I note that as the table shows that this can be done incrementally. And so I would like to suggest to the board that as you looking at the debt shift and other ways to looking at how we move forward with our tax policy, that we look at this. In particular, if you look at the bottom, if you went all the way to 150, interestingly, that $10.5 million number comes back. So if the factor was at 150, it would restore equality over that period of time that I showed on the second page. And lastly, something that we've never talked about to date, to my knowledge, before the board at least, is I was having dinner with a friend the other evening who lives in another adjacent town. And she was talking about her taxes going down because she had qualified for a residential exemption. This would mean people who are owner-occupied would get a deduction. Here I show Arlington, because of our mix, is limited to 20%, which is what I printed out here. So this would also impact people of lower valued homes. Probably many of our seniors might have an advantage from this. And this would also impact apartments and things like that. And the assessors in previous members have quoted that if the apartments were treated as commercial property, which they're not in Massachusetts, they're treated as residential property for the purposes of assessment, if I got that right, then it would make perfect sense to go to a factor of 1.25 or 1.5. But without that, we can't do that. So I would suggest to the board and the manager and his staff going forward, and as you look at tax policy, that you look at the MWRA, you look at the factor, and you also look at the residential exception. And that's about all I have to say. Any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Jamieson. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to speak to this? Mike Grilli.
residential exemption, because Gordon has talked about it before. We went through it in detail, I'll say 12 or 13 years ago. The residential exemption works very, very well in Cambridge, Somerville, and Boston, where they have a great split of owner occupancy versus non-owner occupied. Now, by definition, a residential exemption is granted if the person who's the owner of a single, a two, or a condominium, or a three, lives there. If the owner does not live there, they're not granted the exemption. Part of the problem is there's what's called a break-even point. Under a residential exemption, you have one rate. And in our case right now, just even though it was a little mistake with the number earlier, if we went to a residential exemption, what's referred to as a full 20%, the tax rate would be $15.07. So roughly a $2.60 difference. The residential exemption at 20% would be $117,000. So what you do is you take the assessment minus the $117,000 times, quote, what I'm going to tell you is the new tax rate of $15.07. Here is the kicker. We have 7,994 single-family homes. Might be off by one or two. Based on our information, we only have 195 that are not owner-occupied. We have 3,662 condos. We have 573 of those that are not owner-occupied. We have 2,218 twos. 502 of those are not owner-occupied. I think for threes, there's 196. Okay, and there's about 40 of those that are not owner-occupied. Now comes the kicker. You have to figure out what's referred to as a break-even point. The average assessment is, what is it, 665 off the top of my head? The break-even point, if we were to go to a residential exemption, would be $701,250. So we then would have a situation. Joe, for next spring, think of this, when you go for election. We would have 2,250 single-family homeowners who would be granted a residential exemption whose assessments would be over $701,000. So you would grant them an exemption and their taxes would go up. They didn't vote last time, they'll vote next spring. Of the condos, they make out the best of all. The average condo, I'm not sure of the assessment, but getting a break of $116,000, they make out like bandits. I can say the same for the two and the three. To summarize it, we'd have 13,874 residential properties, singles, twos, condos, and threes. Of those, 27.7%, or 3,846, we would grant an exemption and their taxes would go up. I'm not sure that's what you want as your tax policy. That, however, would affect the apartments. Now, even though it would affect the apartments, who's going to pay all that increase? My guess would be the tenants. I'm not sure. But that's the problem with a residential exemption in the town of Arlington. As I said earlier, Somerville, Cambridge, and Boston, because of the great disparity between ownership. Now, we had a former assistant treasurer whose assessment, if I'm not mistaken, was $396,000. The residential exemption was $185,000. His tax bill was $2,100. And he lives down near the Museum of Science, if I'm not mistaken. Plus, they had classification. And again, we're in a situation here, as Gordon correctly stated, we had 94% residential, 6% CIP. Doesn't work with those numbers. Any questions?
Would you repeat what you just said, please? I got about 12 of those figures.
If I
but the
thought there would be
18
comprehension, I'd be glad to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greeley. Much appreciated. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Hearing none. Do I have a motion from the board?
I move that we set well, we don't adjust the rate, we keep it even. That's the vote you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
We keep it a factor of one.
Tax rate,
Factor of 1.
factor of 1.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Mahan. Is there any further discussion on this? Hearing no further discussion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much to the Board of Assessors, and thank you very much, Mr. Tierney, for all of your work on this, and everyone else who has
I'd
supported.
like to have the Board of Selectmen sign the LA5 for me, please.
Absolutely.
Anyone?
I'm wondering about that.
I'm normally the third to sign, Paul, so.
I don't know how long it would be from Doug. Thank you. Good to see you.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed working with you. I'm sure I'll see
Oh,
you
no.
around.
Red ink, bad? I hope it'll photocopy. That's the only thing.
Excuse me.
Color copy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Use that pen once a year.
It's good that you have one.
I'm looking out over the hall, and my sense is that there are a lot of folks who are here for items 9 and 10. So with the consent of my colleagues, I'd like to take those out of order. Okay. Hearing no objection. We're going to start with outdoor beautification, and this is an interesting alignment of the stars. Well, we have a three-part agenda item. I had actually asked the staff to put in the third part, which is actually a vote for us, and was very pleased to learn that both the Arlington Garden Club, and this should say that the Friends of Robbins Library Gardens were interested in coming in and speaking on the issue of outdoor beautification in the town with us this evening. So it makes for a nice package of discussion here prior to our discussion and our vote. So we're going to start with a veteran select tone. Jane Foley with an update on Civic Development Committee of the Arlington Garden Club.
Good evening. My name is Jane Foley, and I am the chair of the Civic Development Committee for the Arlington Garden Club. And before I begin, I have two off-the-record things to say. First of all, the commitment of the Garden Club, especially the Beautification Committee, is obvious here tonight. You're all back there. Every single one member of the Beautification Committee has come tonight, and I can't tell you how much I feel in my heart about that, because we are committed to make Arlington a beautiful town. And my second thought is to you town people, and the town hall looks beautiful, and the Chamber of Commerce has done a wonderful job with the holiday lights, and it's a good beginning for us. But as most of you are aware, the Arlington Garden Club's Beautification Committee has responsibility for overseeing and helping to maintain and preserve over 60 Arlington public spaces, including traffic islands, planters, and gardens in all areas of Arlington. We've been very pleased with the interest of so many businesses and citizens that volunteer to plant, maintain, and water these islands and planters. They certainly enhance the town. We thought we'd take a few minutes of your time to create awareness, from our unique perspective of what's working well and what needs improvement in terms of beautification of Arlington. What's working well? The Town Hall Gardens and the Jason Russell House, Robbins Farm and Uncle Sam's Park, the reflecting pool area that has received a grant that the Friends of the Town Hall Gardens has written. We're looking forward to that refurbishing. East Arlington Islands and trees, although we do have concern about the tidiness of these areas and ongoing maintenance. Specific businesses with planters and window boxes that look beautiful. We have to explain and help them to keep them going. Some of the examples are Mystic Wine and Spirits, Common Ground, Cafe Nero, Zen Ren Chuan Martial Arts, Mononymy Grill, Olivio's, Bistro Goet, and in the Heights, Massage Envy and the Classic Kitchen and Bath. In comparison to other towns and cities, let's look at the contiguous towns of Winchester, Lexington, Belmont, Woburn, and other towns, Wakefield, Medford, Revere, Somerville, Cambridge. We could do better. What needs improvement? The entry islands, the gateways to the town, some of them need scheduled maintenance. Hanging plants. The new watering truck, I understand, does not have the capability of watering hanging plants. Potted and ground planters throughout the business areas would also need watering. I think we could get the businesses to help there, but we still have to maintain them. We have to be able to say that we can maintain them. Landscape tidiness, the town islands, municipal parking area routinely swept and trimmed. Weeds, grass, tree sprouts along the tree strips on Mass Ave. The Route 2 extension islands mowed and maintained. We've certainly noted through the years that if islands or containers are newly planted and look beautiful initially, maintenance and watering is sometimes a problem. Whether it's weeding, replacing dead plants, just keeping them maintained. We can provide you with photographs of those areas that need improvement if it would be helpful. Our goal for tonight was to create awareness of what might be done to enhance the already wonderful work that's being done to beautify Arlington, and that you might take our observations and recommendations into consideration as you prepare next year's budget. Thank you for your time and your continued interest in the improving the beautification of Arlington. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for all of the efforts of the Garden Club, especially around our traffic islands and such, so important. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you for the update, and thank you all for coming. I definitely also really appreciate the form of it, the understanding where we're doing right and the places that we can improve. That's a format that's really helpful to help understand, so thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to move receipt of the update from the Arlington Garden Club by Mrs. Foley and others.
We have a motion for receipt by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Byrne. Is there any further discussion? Question? Mr. Greeley.
Just a comment. I'd like to know where in heck the watering truck is. I have made 1,000 trips across Mystic Street to the island that I've helped maintain with these buckets. But really, a watering truck will come around and water that island?
No, I'm saying that we don't
Oh.
have one. No.
But she just said the watering truck can't water hanging plants.
We do have a watering truck. I was told the DPW does have a watering truck, but it does not
Yeah, I'm sorry, you got
water
it.
any islands that we know of.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize
It's
that.
kind of like where in the world is.
Yeah. I'm worn out.
Mr. Manager, you look
And
like
you
you were
drove
ready to
the
jump
truck.
in on that.
Sorry.
Did you have anything?
I was simply going to say that the watering truck that the tree warden utilizes is used for tree watering.
Right.
They're designed for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, on a motion by Ms. Mahan, seconded by Mr. Byrne for receipt. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Next, we have an update on the Friends of Robbins Town Gardens. I think I've got that right, all right? Sally Nash.
Hello.
So
Good evening.
you can pull down the mic a little if you want.
Is that better?
Yeah, excellent.
So I am in fact chair of the board of the Friends of the Robbins Library.
Okay.
There is representation here tonight from the Friends of the Robbins Town Garden, and I will refer to those later on.
Okay.
But my intent here tonight is, rather than update you on the Friends, is to raise your awareness about the gardens in front of the Robbins Library. When the wall was replaced and there were new plantings put in, it significantly improved the appearance from Mass Ave. However, if you go around the corner onto Peggs Bengler Way, the landscaping is looking pretty sad. So the library, I think you'll agree, is one of the gems of the Arlington Centre, and is in fact visited by over 1,000 people a day. So we would really like to see this area upgraded. Unfortunately, the time in years and climate have taken their toll on the trees, and several of them are deteriorating. So the red-leafed Japanese maples that were planted in the planters on either side of the front entry, one of them is dead, the other one is dying. So what we would like to do is to remove those trees, clear out the planters, and then replant trees in the spring. The trees that are in the lawn, the crabapples and the dogwood, are also in pretty bad shape, I think. We'll have a clear idea when we look at them in the spring, but they're probably going to need either significant pruning or replacement. So, the Friends Board is working with the Garden Club and the Tree Committee, as well as the Friends of the Robbins Town Garden and the Library Director, to explore ways to really try and spruce up that area. So I've mentioned the removal of the trees or the replacement. We have a team of volunteers who are willing to take on the lighter tasks, such as weeding and some of the light pruning. But any help or support that we can get from the town to complete some of the heavier tasks would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments, Ms. Nash? Yeah, thank you very much. Do I have a motion to receive the report? I think Mr. Byrne got that and Ms. Mahan seconded. Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Lastly, truly a coincidence of scheduling. I had asked for the inclusion of a proposed vote here to create an outdoor beautification committee of the Board of Selectmen. I know this was in speaking with a number of folks. This particularly focusing on seasonal and patriotic displays. I know that in the past we have had patrons for flag displays on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Independence Day, and such, and seasonal displays. And as was alluded to, the Chamber of Commerce has done, I think, a great job this year in the center, and we've seen some efforts in some of the heights and such. The idea here is to create an outdoor beautification committee of the Board of Selectmen, which would be able to help advise on these types of programs. I have reached out to our veterans agent and the Chamber of Commerce, and I consulted also with the manager about the possibility of participation in this. Part of the recommended vote is that we establish a gift account such as we have in the past for some other purposes, and the idea being that we would then be able to coordinate and work with all of these other organizations who are doing so much work for the town, but to fill in some of these gaps. You have the proposed membership here in the vote. Note I mentioned a member of the Board of Selectmen or staff designee, because I have a feeling there might be a staff member who takes a special interest in keeping our town. Would I be correct in that, Ms. Kropelka?
You are correct.
I would be.
I do not want to serve as chair, but I'm willing to help
Okay,
anywhere I can.
okay. It was just a hunch, just a hunch. And we've been
Bless you.
brainstorming some ideas around ways to bring funds into that gift account. But for now, this is the mechanism that's being put out before the board. That's what I've got. Mr. Dunn.
So I love the idea and I love the direction. I'm wondering, does it make sense maybe to say like the first charge of the group is to write maybe a bit more specific set of goals?
Sure.
Yeah. My only fear is that it's a little bit that this document is loose.
Yep.
And it'll get us through our first year, and then in 5 years, we're gonna look at it and say, I have no idea what this group is here or why it's doing or what's going on. And I guess kind of related to that is should we retitle it to the specific scope that you're talking about? So it's like outdoor, seasonal, and patriotic displays, because among other things, I don't want it to step on some of the other volunteer groups inadvertently, because
That is true.
there's a bunch of like
That is true.
Yeah, and I honestly, when I first read this, I thought this was an intent to create like a unifying body that was going to look at all of the groups across all the town. And I was like, wow, that was ambitious. And yeah, so I guess I have two suggestions for amendments. One is to slightly change the scope of the title, and two is to maybe it doesn't even have to be a part of the motion, but like to charge the group to come back with a tighter purpose document for us to like re-adopt, something like that.
As the proponent who cannot make a motion as chair, I will say that I'm fine with that as a motion.
Okay, so do you have a proposed, is there a title that you would feel comfortable with, or is there?
I like what you said, the seasonal patriotic display, or
Yeah, okay. So moved.
Second. Okay, it's moved by Mr. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Byrne. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Greeley?
Well, I kind of wish it were larger. As we heard from Sally and Jane, and I saw this up for the third vote, I'm like, oh, maybe that's a way to help the issues that they've brought up. But if I'm understanding, no, that's not the case. Is that a fair statement?
I think the first priority that I had in mind was seasonal and patriotic. If a group like this can serve utility in having a broader charge, I mean, I'm
Yeah, well, subsume in what Dan has recommended, which is they come up with a more fuller description.
Yeah, I think if we talk it out and we get to it, a group of people talks it out and comes to
with recommended goals for acceptance. Yeah.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes, sir.
Okay. Any further discussion? No?
we'll arrange a meeting to discuss it and come back after the holiday.
Fantastic.
Jane, is that okay with you people? We'll have a meeting after the holiday to decide what we want to do. Start. Is that okay?
Oh, somebody wants to say something?
Stephanie.
Sorry. Oh, Ms. Marilyn,
I don't know if I,
can you come to the mic?
oh, come to the mic. I just thought you might want to think about the word patriotic and consider, it in its broadest terms.
Okay.
And its pluralistic ideations, rather than simply just, I don't want to put any words or ideas into anybody's mouth. But there's a lot of ways to express patriotism.
Right.
So that's all.
Right. I think we're thinking, though, in terms of Patriots' Day and Veterans Day. Yeah.
So patriotic in the broadest sense.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. I think that could be reflected in the goals.
Yep.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move on to the arts update. And let me just clarify, is this still going to be presented as two separate updates, or did you combine them? It's two. Two related, okay. Okay. So we have two items on the agenda. Yeah, I did ask that they be coordinated closely. The first is the annual report of the Arlington Commission on Arts and Culture with Adria Arch and Stephanie Marlin Curiel. The commission is charged by the bylaw with providing the Board of Selectmen with an annual report. And the second part is the Arlington Public Art update, which was tabled from the last meeting, and Arlington Public Art is now part and parcel of the ACAC, so.
That's great. Seems you're pretty up to date on our annual report here. So Adria and I are co-chairs of the Arlington Commission on Arts and Culture. This is Adria Arch. I'm Stephanie Marlin Curiel. And we've really focused the past year. This is our annual report, so I'm going to summarize from last year, but we've really focused on the cultural planning process. And the idea was to develop a cultural plan for the town to follow and flesh out some things that were alluded to in the master plan concerning historical and cultural resources, and also open space and repurposing of historic buildings. So much of that has been addressed and more in the cultural plan, which I know you have already accepted and received. The other part of the cultural plan, the first part was done with MAPC, as you know, the Massachusetts Area Planning Council, through a technical assistance grant and the cooperation facilitation of Jenny Raitt from the planning department, and Allie Carter too has been an enormous help and have been partnering with us on the implementation as well. We also did another plan courtesy of community block grant funds secured by Jenny to consolidate or rationalize at least the several arts organizations and other organizations with arts and culture interests, and we have done that. And so both of those plans were completed in June, and as per keeping with this consolidation spirit, those plans have been consolidated together into the Arlington Arts and Culture Action Plan. So then we have the implementation of the plan, which we've started from the acceptance of the plan, which was in June, has included the website, coming up with an arts and culture website. We've put out an RFP. We have about 5 or 6 proposals from various website designers and brand strategists, and we will be interviewing them later this week and making a selection before the end of the year so that we can start work in January, and the website will be completed within this fiscal year. This will be a comprehensive arts and culture website, will be the go-to site to learn about everything happening in arts and culture. Will also be a resource for artists and citizens, looking for all the licenses and regulations and everything, applications and things, and how to join the various, our committee, our one consolidated committee and subcommittees. And let's see, I don't know if you want to hear about the configuration of, I guess it's still this year, so I guess we should talk about it, which is that we'll still remain the Arlington Commission on Arts and Culture. We'll be expanded by membership from the Arlington Cultural Council. Arlington Public Art has folded in, and the Cultural District Managing Partnership will also, the leadership of that will also be part of this core steering committee, or the expanded Commission on Arts and Culture. And we also the ACA will be represented in this expanded commission. And also artists will have a representative, either through the new organization that came out of the cultural plan called Art Links Arlington. Cultural planning processes emerged this group to represent artists, and they will most likely be represented, and or other professional artists. Any other representatives? Most of them are part of the Cultural District Managing Partnership, so that already includes the library and the Chamber of Commerce and the planning department and all this. And one of the great results of all this is our partnership with the town has been strengthened, particularly through the planning department planning department. And also, I should mention that we were successful in receiving, a budget from the Finance Committee, of which we're extremely grateful. We'd like to express our thanks for all the support. And part of that was sort of a, what do you call this? pay it forward or a leap of faith or what is endorsement of that we were going to consolidate all of our efforts under one umbrella and be able to administer and distribute the money wisely. Most of it has been gotten toward the cultural plan implementation, the website development, and all the wonderful work on the public art, which we'll go on to in a second. The only last thing I need to say is that we also applied for a cultural district designation from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. Joe, in particular, was very active in that committee, in the managing partnership, and of course, Adam signed the document. So the town has been very supportive, and we're also happy to report that you already know that we did receive the cultural district designation. So we're very excited about that, and there are lots of points in the cultural plan which point to activating spaces in the cultural district and things like that that we'll be working on this year, and marketing the cultural district as well. The part of the effort that helped us get that cultural district designation was this Pathways project, because it helped with the connective tissue between East and the center that the MCC, Mass Cultural Council, was a little concerned about when we applied for this enlarged district that encompassed the East and the center. And so we were very lucky to be successful, but also it wasn't just luck, it was the
hard work.
Hard work and vision. of Cecily Miller, our public art consultant, Adria, and the public art committee. So I'll hand it over to them to tell you some more.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Coaching. So, hi everybody. The last time I visited you all formally like this, it was with the proposal for what we were going to do, and so I'm really delighted to be able to come back, to return and say we did everything that we proposed, and it turned out extraordinarily well. Very, very exciting projects. As Stephanie said, one of the concerns of the MCC with any cultural district, it has to be walkable with arts and culture along the whole route, and as you know, there's a big residential section between Capitol Square and the center. So rather than tackle Mass Ave, because that probably would take a lot more dollars and engineering than we were able to do, we thought about putting artwork on the bikeway and connecting these two village centers with this like really lovely, rustic, very busy section of town, which is itself a cultural asset of the town. When you think of Arlington's character, Spy Pond and the greenery are really so important, and nature is so inspiring. So it fits right into a cultural district. So the first, I guess, next slide, sorry. So these were our goals. I won't read through them. You have it on paper. But I will just mention that it also was the 25th anniversary of the bikeway, so it was great to join in on that momentum. So next slide. So the first piece that we installed was a piece called Flutter. The artist on the right is Claudia Ravichiere. This was a piece that at one point was put up in Fort Point in Boston, and it migrated here to Arlington. And on the bikeway really speaks to kind of movement, passage, migration journeys, when we think about butterflies and the incredible movement they make from South America through Mexico up to New England. Okay, so next slide. And we'll again skip through the text. Then Nilu Muchala, who lives here in Arlington, is a wonderful designer and public artist, came up with Rhetoric of Opposites. You probably all heard a little bit of the controversy that this piece generated in the town, and Nilu's reaction to that is she's really pleased with that. She wanted this artwork to just get people to reflect, to think, to sort of prompt conversations. And I was out on the bike path quite a bit during the installation and after the installation, and had a lot of really interesting conversations with people that ranged from families that were using these opposite pairs of words to talk with their kids about opposites to, what does it mean to be a member of a community? How do you tell when something is true and when something's not? More philosophical conversations. So, next. And this is now fading out. It was done with a type of paint that's faded out and it's pretty much disappeared. This was a sort of a fun, whimsical tribute to the urban wildlife that seeks shelter in Arlington, and also to the Fox Library and the fox as a mascot for citizens who make things happen with their ingenuity. Next. And then we have a few more pictures to show you some of the behind the scenes we did 2 fall projects that were really larger in scale than the first 3 that I showed, that were more sort of pop-up and experimental, but these were pretty involved projects. And Adria Arch here, I asked her if she would lead a project with knitters in Arlington, and she more than rose to the occasion. She did a really wonderful project which included recruiting 57 volunteers to knit panels to make sleeves for a set of trees. These are some of the volunteer members of what we called the Arlington Knitting Brigade. And next slide. Oops, sorry. Can you go back one? Because yeah. These are the names of some of our knitters, and the first couple meetings we had were hosted by the libraries, one at the Robins and one at the Fox. And what we did to give this project impact was each knitter could invent their own panel and their own design and express, their creative vision, but they did it with a unified palette, which I think is also really nice metaphor for a community working together, where people have their individual forms of expression and their diverse ideas, but come together to make something very big and impactful happen. So
could I?
Sure.
So through the chairman, what's a unified palette? You mean same
sorry,
colors?
same colors.
Sorry.
Being your public art consultant, I have to say unified palette, not they all use the same color of yarn.
Now I get it.
But they did. So, okay, next. And we had a day where the members of the brigade brought their pieces, and so you can get a sense here of the diversity of patterns that people did, and also you can see that it's similar colors. Some people wove in a few illicit, no, they weren't illicit, they were allowed to, but a few of their own stashes of yarn. And it was just a really nice activist, much like the garden club, this gave citizens an opportunity to do this, make this activist contribution. Next slide. And then the slide on the right shows you Adria and I met in her studio several times to lay these out and kind of configure how exactly are they going to go on the trees. Things didn't necessarily turn out exactly the size we thought they would, and we had to do some swapping around and try to figure out how to make it look its best. And I was really honored to be able to collaborate with her on that. But so then here we have installation, and Adria found these great arborists who at first were like, you want us to do what? They had never done anything like this before. And they got totally into it, and we're being very careful about how to pull the sleeves together and pat them down just the right way. It was really, they were great. So, and while we were doing the install, these are just a few, there was a group of sort of preschool kids. One of the knitter's children was in this preschool class, so she arranged for them to come and make a field trip while we were doing installation. I love this woman in the lower left. This was her reaction. It was just the, and people brought us coffee, and it took two days, right? Is that right, Adria? It took us 2 solid days working.
One full day of actually hanging in the trees.
Yeah, but 2, I think, in the arborists had to come back, didn't they? Am I mixed up? Oh, I'm mixed up. Okay. Just seemed like 2 days. Okay. And then we had a reception, which the picture on the. So I'm sure many of you saw the really great coverage. This was sort of a synergistic thing that a Globe reporter came by to take pictures at the same time that the Globe was writing about cultural districts in general. And because there was this great visual, Arlington really got the lion's share of that article and really got featured, which I'm really happy about. It's not easy to get, as you know, it's not easy to get coverage for these kind of activities. So then our second big project was with Frank Facello, and he did a work that riffed on water currents at Spy Pond on the hillside leading down to the playgrounds, and it's a safe spot off the path. People can look at the sculpture from the stairway that's to the right. And so, next slide. It's made entirely of environmental sticks gathered on site. There's no nails, there's no wire. It's just like the way animals build nests. And so he spent about 9 days in Arlington working on that sculpture and doing a residency at the Addison School. And this was really exciting. Dave Ardito made this happen, and a group of 3 art teachers brought their art club, their after-school art club, out into the woods to work on a piece with Frank, and they all designed and built something together. And let's see, the next slide. And the next slide. This was, Arlington is so, wait, can you go back to the, yeah. Arlington is so fortunate to have a wooded area like this right behind the school. These kids got to spend probably about 6 hours in nature. You know how the Japanese have forest bathing as a way to build physical and mental health? I mean, this place is like a sanctuary, and so the kids got to adventure. They fanned out and picked up all of these sticks from the forest and brought them back. There were like these kids carrying these like 15-foot branches to build the sculpture. So I think that was a really very special event for the school and for the artist and for the kids. Okay. So then this is just a pop-up thing that we did for Town Day, and I didn't know if any of you happened to see this, but we invited people to pose with the Arlington trophy for being the most Arlingtonist. And this was a collaboration of the 3 arts groups. We did T-shirts that the volunteers wore that had bestest volunteers ever on the back, and then had the Arlington Cultural Council, the Arlington Commission on Arts and Culture, and Arlington Public Art on the back. And it was just like a fun celebration for Town Day. So I really, you know, I'm standing here talking about this, but many, many people contributed to it. It wouldn't be a success without the broad participation that it had. Certainly you all gave us the green light, and Adam for believing we could do something on the bike path safely without, you know, causing problems, and all of the other organizations. I just give a little shout out to 13 Forest Gallery. They hosted artist talks for us with each of the visiting artists, and with wine and cheese, and invited all of their, you know, their large list of people to come and find out about public art in Arlington, and those were really nice events. So I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions or comments by any of my colleagues on this?
Move receipt.
We have a motion for receipt by Ms. Mahan.
Should we pick favorites?
Too hard. Do I have a second on the motion to receive both reports? I'll just say before we vote, you know, thank you very much for all the work on this. I saw the looks on the faces as folks went by some of these displays, and it made a big impression. One thing in the ACAC main report that was referenced and should be called out is that with the CDBG support, there was this effort that was spearheaded by Planning and Community Development around this consolidation. And I know that a lot of us up here and a lot of other folks in the community have tried to wade through the alphabet soup of the arts organizations in town. And I think that's going to go a long way to not only to coordinating, but also removing some of that confusion. My only question, I think I'd direct this to the manager, is I'm assuming we're going to have to look at a warrant article on that, though, since ACAC is defined within the bylaws?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So before I take a vote, anything else? Great. Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you so much for coming in. Okay. We will now return to previous item on the agenda, item number 8, which is discussion of the policy regarding transfer of alcohol licenses. Mr. Heim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is put on the agenda in large part because there's been an increased interest and activity in this area in a number of contexts. I received a number of requests in my office to discuss the Selectmen's policy regarding the transfer of alcohol licenses off location. In other words, most of the transfers that this board has approved in the past by sort of both official and unofficial sort of policy have been transfers of license that are A, at the same location, and B, are usually in the acquisition of a business. So you've had several restaurants, at least during my tenure, who have had their license transferred from one ownership group to another because they're essentially buying the restaurant and maintaining the license. For a number of reasons, there's been a little bit more of an inquiry about whether or not the selectmen are interested in having a discussion about transferring licenses off-site so that a license would not necessarily stay at the same location, which is permitted under the ABCC's regulations and state law. There's also been a number of discussions about, mostly from interested parties, about what the selectmen's criteria are for allowing a license to transfer to from one body to from one sort of owner to another with a little less specificity with respect to are we talking about moving a location. So usually when we have a restaurant, again, the business is a mixed business. There's obviously the common vic license associated with the alcohol license. For the package stores, it's a little bit more complicated because there's no value to the business without the license. So I'm putting this up for discussion. You have your current policy, which I think accurately reflects the state of the law. There's no transfer that can be approved without the selectmen okaying it. But I think now is at least a time to begin some discussion, and I know that some individual members of the board have also wanted to talk about a couple of different issues. So again, you have your policy in front of you. It has been the practice of this board to generally discourage a license from being transferred from one location to a different location. So for example, if a package store was to sell their business, you might approve the sale of that business and the transfer of that license as part of that sale. But if a package store was essentially to discontinue the use of their package store license and someone was to seek a transfer of that license, the selectmen have generally said, no, we don't want to allow that. Does that make sense to folks? Maybe I'm not being clear enough.
It does make sense. I just have one question, though, which is there any reason right now to transfer a restaurant license? Because we have licenses available right now, right?
No. Exactly. I believe we have restaurant license available.
So right now, there's no reason that someone would, for instance, need to transfer. Technically, there's no reason. There's no scarcity on that one. The only thing when there's a scarcity right now is package stores.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, there are scenarios in which I can imagine that happening.
Okay.
But the biggest issue is that we are at our capacity for package store licenses. I think the selectmen might be generally aware that there are some package stores that are exclusively package stores, and there's others that have a package store license or pertinent to another business, like Prime Your Local Butcher, for example. So I'm not necessarily recommending a course of action. I guess what I'm saying is that the selectmen have taken what I think is an allowably conservative approach, which says your license stays with that particular business operating in that particular location, and absent, wholesale sale of that business and that business moving to a new ownership, we generally do not approve what I think has sometimes been referred to as a commoditization of these licenses. It's not a direct payment necessarily for the license, but if someone, there are many financial arrangements that can be made, and there are cities and towns that essentially allow, maybe it's not as explicit as this, the sale of a license from its current holder to another entity. Again, though, your practice has generally been, if you decide you're not going to use your license, it comes back to the Board of Selectmen, and we will decide where it's going to go from there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hine. Ms. Mahan?
Stop me if I'm entering into any area of conversation that I shouldn't. When we first talked about all alcohol licenses, it's my memory there were 3. And ideally, the selectmen had said, and Mr. Greeley, correct me as a senior member of the board, that, one in the East Arlington, one in the center, and one in the Heights, and then we proposed and the voters approved that we increase it to 5, which is where we're at right now. My simplistic question that I have are, I'm thinking of 2 particular licenses, Summer Street and Prime Butcher Shop in the Heights. I guess I would ask you, are you saying that, just from me, myself individually, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, that those all alcohol licenses are tied to that property? Or, I know in terms of Summer Street, if you said, well, the owners are going to sell it, and my thing would, I would need to see everything that they did, because I question the owner's management of the current establishment. So my thing is, as well as with concern, a lot of people came to me saying, why are you having this all alcohol package store right near the high school? But then I also point to Scootra next door, which has been a model restaurant with an alcohol license, and we just approved outdoor seating. So it's not that I'm against that, but my thing is, I really, for myself personally, would not trust the management, owners, et cetera, of the Summer Street all alcohol license to recommend to us someone that may be taken over. So my thing is, are you advising that on those, for myself individually, none of my colleagues, but for the one in the Heights at Prime Butcher, as well as Summer Street, that basically those 2 all alcohol licenses are tied there, and really can't, because my thing is, I would be open to, the Prime Butcher in the Heights, perhaps somewhere else in the Heights, considering an applicant, and the same thing with Summer Street. So give me some guidance on that.
Ms. Vaughn, I think what I'm saying is that it's my understanding of the board's practice, and my reading of the board's current sort of policy has been traditionally that a license granted, and Mr. Dunn points out correctly that this has not really been as much of an issue in restaurants because there have been other licenses available, that the license has generally been for a business at a location, and that the Board of Selectmen has not been comfortable with the idea in the past with allowing those licenses to be transferred to another location, either under the same business or another business, but that essentially that license was given, vetted for that business at that location, operating in that manner. I think that the selectmen may do that, and I think the selectmen could also allow more fluidity of transfers. So I'm merely putting this up for discussion to see whether the board is interested in continuing its general practice of saying, we don't want to have license transfers essentially off-site. I guess I hear what you're saying, which is it is possible that maybe a business wants to keep the license and just relocate. That's a slightly more nuanced question, but I also think the board could say that that's a different scenario than allowing the transfer of a license to another entity at another location. So I'm not specifically bringing this up in the context of either Arlington Liquors or Primary Local Butcher. This has actually come up over the last several years in a couple contexts with respect to a couple other types of a couple other package stores in Arlington. And what the message I've been giving folks is that, yes, I understand that under state law, they can theoretically transfer these licenses to somebody else, and to be frank with you, that they could try to work that into some sort of, commoditization or purchase price of a business or some sort of financial deal, but that our board is generally not, has not allowed that, and that it's within our discretion as local licensing authority to say, we want a license to come back to us, and then we'll determine where it goes from there.
And I agree with that, because I guess what I was misconstruing is that, to me, the 2 licenses for all alcohol that I cited, in my mind, that Summer Street Liquors, that doesn't mean whatever goes in that space automatically has to be another liquor store and they automatically have it. My thing is, if for some reason it were to change hands, it comes back to the board, and the same thing with Prime. So my thing is, I just want to make sure what we're stating is a location that gets an all-alcohol, malt, beer, wine, does not mean that that location is forever destined and as well as occupies or has the promise of, you can get this from the board. You know where I'm going?
I understand that an alcohol license cannot transfer to somebody else without it being approved by you. So that just because someone wants to open a package store closes and then it wants to reopen and then somebody else wants to open one in the same location, there's nothing magical about the location. You have to approve every transfer or new license. If the same owners who are on the name of that license aren't the ones operating that business, they can't, use that license. Only after you either approve the transfer of that license to new owners, sometimes the same thing is true of managers. So, yes, it's true that there's nothing magical about a location in terms of, you having to say yes to a transfer of license. You have, any license transfer has to be vetted by you. So if a package store closes, that license comes back to the Board of Selectmen. If there's a transaction, that license has to be approved by the Board of Selectmen to go into a new ownership group or whatever else.
Or not.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Corley?
So, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, whether or not we should have different rules for restaurants and package stores. In a restaurant, if someone sells the restaurant, alcohol is a service to that restaurant, and we take 2 separate votes. Do we allow the common victualer's license, and then we vote on whether or not we allow the all-alcohol or beer, wine, whatever, the license. But in a liquor store, that's all there is. And what I think we need to make sure we avoid is anybody believing an owner of a liquor store is selling the alcohol license to the new owners. Because if they are, then we first of all, it means that owner is determining whom they think is best to have the next alcohol license in Arlington for a liquor store, and we have others who would like them. But if, so I think a liquor store should be different standards, and I think, basically that if someone's leaving the business, they need to give the license back to the Board of Selectmen, and then we would have a process for, were we all in here when we chose these? I forget, right? We all were.
Well, the latest ones.
Yeah, right.
Additional 2.
Right, and so we've all been through that, is my point. But just, so I don't know the solution to this, but we do have, the case of Prime Butcher in the Heights, that's primarily a meat house, a store first. And apparently they may be interested in divesting themselves of the alcohol part of that. So clearly, it can't stay with that location. We'd have to agree that so again, Prime would give up the license to this board, and then we would advertise or have some sort of hearings or whatever. And I believe we could enforce, the location can change as long as, in my opinion, in this case, it stays in the Heights. Because that was among our original, we wanted one in the East, the Center, and the Heights. So, anyhow, Dan, I know wants to say stuff.
So, I agree with the principle that we shouldn't let them be sold, but at the same time, I think the thing that I'm realizing as I'm hearing you talk and the things that you're expressing. So I've said before, I want the owner of the Summer Street liquor store to sell. I do not want him to run that business anymore.
Right.
And if I think about what his incentives are, he could walk, he could like close the business and walk out of town, but he's got a lease commitment, I assume. I don't know for sure, I just assume. And, and like, so like he has no incentive to walk away, but he would have incentive to sell the business. And obviously, if you're selling that business, you're not selling, the chips and the cigarette business. You're selling, the liquor business. And so if he came here, later, like, in the next few months, and he said, I've got a buyer, and we give a long, hard look at the buyer. We make sure that we're, okay with it, and we extract certain commitments from the new buyer, like in terms of upkeep of the building and like making sure that it's maintained and stuff like that. I feel like I could support that. And the reason I feel like I could support it is because I think we'd be better off than where we are right now. But that may be explicitly contradictory to what you want to happen, which will make this a very interesting conversation.
Well, he's wrong. No, it's complication. I grant, and I agree with you. In this particular case, yeah, thank you, Jesus, someone's thinking of selling that particular business. However, I want us to be sure we decide who the next proper owner should be.
Do we get to pick them?
Not make the same mistake.
Do we get to pick them, or do we get to approve them?
Approve them, not pick.
Well, okay, that's a big deal.
Is the wrong selection.
Okay, I think Mr. Heim wanted to chime in on this comment, and then.
I'm sorry, I'll let the board.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Mahan.
I just want to say to that point, I'm really not concerned about the current management on Summer Street and them being able to sell the business, and, because my thing is, that doesn't automatically transfer. My thing is, in my personal opinion, as it stands right now, when it came in January time to vote for the Summer Street business current management that's there, I would not vote to approve that license, because they've demonstrated trifold, in my opinion. And I know I was very lenient and went along with my colleagues the first time that, group came in. And what I'm trying to say is I also wouldn't trust, right now I see they're trying to fish or cut bait in order to make as much money as they can to try to sell the business to somebody else so that they can make the money that they need to make. And my thing is that license is not tied to Summer Street. When it comes up in January, my personal opinion, I would not vote to approve that particular management group. And my second feeling would be, which I think I'm hearing from Attorney Heim and perhaps others, is it's not up to them to say, we need to sell this and make a profit and we're passing it on to you. No. Come January, in my personal opinion, that license is up for serious discussion. Number one, whether it's that management group at Summer Street, and then secondly, number two, whether it's whoever at Summer Street. My thing is, I just want to make sure, and I think I'm hearing this from Attorney Heim, that we're not tied to the 5 original locations that we approved the all alcohol licenses, that they automatically get reverted back to, if for whatever reason, for poor management or in terms of business models, it didn't make sense. That's not a guaranteed spot ad infinitum, that there's an all-alcohol license there. My thing is it needs to revert back.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify a few things. One is that license renewals are coming in December 18th.
Right.
That's when the license renewal period, this discussion will be had. Two, I want to be transparent about this, that I don't think it's within the scope of our discussion here to be talking about a specific application, but it is my understanding that the Arlington Liquor folks, who again are not the only people that I'm talking about here, there's been at least 3 different package stores that out of 5 that have been in discussions about what the status is of license, how transferable are they. My understanding is that the Arlington Liquors folks are trying to sell their business, and I don't want to obscure that. I just don't think that that's before our business tonight. And the third thing I would say is that I just want to make sure I'm being clear on this, because if I'm not, I apologize. The issue that's in front of you is if somebody applies for a transfer, you have to say yes. They don't get to transfer it as a matter of course. But you also means you also have to say no. In other words, if a transfer application comes in front of you, there are different criteria, and that's, I think, part of what we're discussing tonight.
So we don't have to say yes.
You don't
We
have
have to say.
Yes, you have to.
Yes or no.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I wanted, thank you.
So you don't have to say yes. You don't have to say no. Because I think one thing that the board has always made clear is that it's not comfortable, generally speaking, with essentially what I think people would call selling the license to somebody who wants to open a package store in a different location. But it's not necessarily been the case. We haven't had an issue come up before where someone's tried to do that before the board, or where someone's tried to transfer, I think, a package store at the same location. I don't think that's happened yet.
I feel like a helpful term, if I may, Mr. Chair, is not transfer and or sell the license as an independent commodity separate from a business transaction.
Right.
So if a business was being sold, so Summer Street Liquors, as we're talking about, it was sold, same site, business, the license is part of that business. What you're saying, the board is not exercising, you don't read the board's policy to say that a business owner could just sell the license in and of itself for someone else to go operate a different business elsewhere without being reverted back to the board for a decision-making process.
That's correct, yeah.
Mr. Quayle.
You saying?
Yes.
Sorry. So, for liquor stores, again, I keep feeling this is a different vote than the restaurants necessarily. But Summer Street, whatever, Mystic, any of them, right.
500 Mass Ave.
All they have to sell is their liquor, right? And what good is liquor without a license? I wonder if we could, or through you, Mr. Chairman, to town council, could we require that someone who wants to potentially purchase a liquor store must first get approval from us for a liquor license before they can purchase the liquor store? Can we reverse the process?
So I guess, Mr. Greeley, I mean, permit me just for a moment. I think the point is kind of moot because that buyer is going to make that transfer contingent upon the purchase anyway. So there's no buyer who's going to, so I think we're going to get what you want anyway.
I'm sorry.
Fair point. Yeah, I hear you.
Mr. Hunter.
And if I may, that is what's happening. So when someone tries to buy a business like a liquor store, they have to come to you to get your approval to transfer that license to the new owner. Both the new owner has to essentially come up and satisfy you that they are going to be a responsible owner. I understand, I think, what Ms. Mahan and Mr. Greeley are saying, which is that, well, that's kind of closing the pool for who gets to have this in front of them, and that's part of the reason we're having this discussion. I do think that there's a little bit of nuance between when that's happening and someone's essentially buying stock, interest in a lease, everything about a business that, as you said, that business has no value without a license, versus when someone is only trying to sell the license because the license itself has value and somebody will buy their own stock, get their own lease, make their own investments, things like that. So there's room for you to have different perspectives on each one of those permutations.
I think I'd like to, sorry, Mr. Chairman, think back to how we got this, Summer Street. It was a convenience store. They applied for a liquor license. They turned half of their convenience store into a liquor license. They expanded, they realized where the money was. They expanded, they turned it into a full liquor store. Then they sold that business to the current owners. And so we saw the old owners, we gave it to the old owners.
Yeah.
I honestly can't remember I don't think I gave that one. I think I only was here for the transfer. And we got a chance to interview the transferee, and he had a clean, record. He'd been operated liquor stores before. We looked at all these things and we said, this guy's going to be fine. I believe that we look back in time and we say, if decisions could be undone, that might be one of them. But you can't see the future all the time. So, and I look at the way that transfer happened, and I'm okay with it. And so, like that, so in a very similar way, if, one of the current 5 owners in a similar way said, I'm moving out of town, or I'm retiring, or, I'm changing my business interests and I want to sell, I want a chance to examine the new owner, and I want a chance to approve them. And in that word, I would say yes.
Okay, so there's really no vote before us, it's just
No.
discussion. So I'll leave it to the chair if we've discussed it out or not.
Yeah, I think we've discussed it quite a bit. I haven't really said anything.
I keep interrupting him.
That's okay.
Sorry, Joe.
And I was going to say that was my recollection, though, that there have been situations where we have approved changes of ownership or changes of ownership interest, I think.
Monogamy.
At the liquor stores, yeah, monogamy for sure. I remember that as a vote. I mean, I understand the incentives and those levers, but I do tend to feel that it should come back to the board. We have a whole set of criteria, and they run the gamut, and a lot of our criteria are also locationally based. So it's hard to know. I mean, and I don't know well enough how this type of a transaction would, in the real world, be written up when somebody is selling this. Would they have the license held in collateral pending an approval? Could you say, well, the new owner is welcome to join the pool and apply new? And is that the same effect?
I think if we did that, we would have, if we said that, like literally every time there's a change of ownership, we're going to do the dog and pony where we investigate everybody, I think that just means we'll never see a sale.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I don't think we have a vote before us. And per Ms. Mahan's question, are we discussed out? Are we disgusted? Thank you very much for this, Mr. Heim. I mean, it's not clear to me that however the board feels, I'm not sure if there may be some fine tuning of the policies that are called for. Although it looks like we've given ourselves a fair amount of leeway in the policy on the all alcohol here. It says that transfers are only by approval of the Board of Selectmen, and to my view. That's correct. We have the ability in one of these cases to state what that transfer process is, and that transfer process may well be go back to the pool and come apply anew. No?
I want to, it depends. If someone's asking to transfer a license, that doesn't mean the person who's the transferor loses their license.
Yeah. Got it.
So that doesn't mean that if you deny a transfer, the license goes back to the pool. It
I
just means
understand.
it's not going from the original owner
Understood.
to somebody else.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. I know, I'm sorry, Diane, but I believe we can allow a transfer of a license to a different location.
I agree.
Is that fair?
Yes.
Are we all agreed?
Yes.
I think under the
Okay.
policies, I would say yes.
That's what
Okay.
I'm advocating for.
Okay.
It's not tied to
Okay.
500 Mass Ave.
And you are not selling the license when you sell the business? We're all agreed?
Yes,
Okay. I'm okay then.
legally, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, we now
Thank
come
you.
to 2 items with the future business. And I think based on Mr. Burns' previous statement, are we bidding you adieu now?
Yes.
He's taking his little man.
Taking the
that's
little
case.
man.
It's truly been a pleasure, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. And I will see you in a few weeks.
Yes.
We will see you. Oh, do you want the bubble wrap in the bag?
No, it's okay.
Oh, wow. Did you have to do that?
Thanks. Thank you.
My calendar open, which is going to die. It died.
It'll come up on your
It died. because-
agenda item. You'll get the calendar. Oh, but you want to put it in your thing. Okay,
Yeah,
it's all right.
It's all right.
Okay.
We'll wing it.
Joe, are you looking for,
It's fine. It's fine.
He needs his calendar.
It's fine.
His schedule is.
No worries. I have a good enough feel, I think.
Excuse
for it.
me.
Okay. All set, we're moving into future Board of Selectmen meetings.
I know where to start.
All right.
So
January 8th?
January 8th
Eighth.
looks like a no-brainer to me.
Definitely, I was gonna say it has to be the 8th, no matter
8th
what.
and 22nd?
It works well.
Going once, going twice? Okay. February.
Mr. Cure, I beg your indulgence while I try to get
Sure.
in at the same time.
Let me try to lock the scroll on this thing.
So 19 is President's Day,
19 is President's Day.
12 and 26, maybe?
How about the 5th?
Yeah, 5th and 26th. The 12th is actually the special town meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if we want to plan to meet before that, or we better put it on the books just in case. I think we traditionally do put one on for 7, and we cancel it if we don't need it.
So want to say 5, 12, and 26?
5, 12, and 26 with the, yeah.
Business meetings.
12, I think we typically convene at 7 for town meeting. We will cancel that if we don't need it. And then March,
Actually, sorry,
no problem.
one moment. 5, 12, 26. Okay, sorry.
Okay. And then March,
You want to do 12, 26?
12 and 26 would be fine.
Because we're meeting 3 times in February, and
That is true.
so.
Just bearing in mind that this is
That's peak
warrant
town.
article season,
Yeah.
and
If we need to
I
add
don't
the
know if we
3rd.
need a
Can I just
contingency.
say something, Joe?
Yeah,
I'm not telling you what to do, but I think you should plan at least on the 5th, because the warrant has to be at the Advocate on the 8th with any changes
Got
that
it.
are made. So that gives you Monday night to change
Got it.
something so that I can do it and have it to the Advocate on Thursday,
okay.
which is the 8th, so,
So definitely the 5th.
5th and the 19th.
March 5th, right, we mean?
yes.
Yeah.
March 5th to March 19th. Does that work? And we don't have April on here, but
We can-
do we typically schedule the organizational meeting?
We do.
Yeah. That's the Monday after
That
the
would be-
local election.
Yeah.
The 9th.
So,
The
I
9th.
think it's the 9th.
Yeah.
April 9th.
The election's the 7th.
Yeah,
We may have to have it, well, we'll have to call it for warrant article hearings because of the special and
yeah.
might have to have a meeting in between. But we'll,
So we did, yeah, and we did, but so far we said the March 5th and 19th, right?
right.
Right.
Okay.
And then April 9th, we said. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Okay. We now move to the process of filling board vacancy. I did put together a memo, and I really apologize, this is on the desks, but yeah, I was advised that due to open meeting considerations that I could not distribute it prior. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it, or if you'd like me to just read it through so that we can all just digest it and folks can hear what we're discussing.
Well, maybe, but does the moderator have a copy? I'm going to give him my copy.
Oh, he doesn't have a copy.
Just because I have already read it and know it is.
And you were supposed to be CC'd on this.
Did I get it? Okay.
Okay.
But if you still want to read it for everyone else who doesn't.
I'll read it
Whatever
for
you wanna
those,
do.
just, it gives, I think with something on the desk, it makes, especially of this importance, it makes sense. So this is from myself to the 3 of my colleagues, with a copy to Mr. Leone and Ms. Kropelka regarding filling the board vacancy. As you know, our colleague Stephen Byrne gave notice of his intention to resign his office at the November 20th, 2017 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Byrne's stated intention is that December 4th will be his final meeting as a member of the board, and I note that we do have on our desks also his, Steve's formal letter of resignation to Ms. Lucarelli, which will be actually effective December 11th. Town council has informed us that under the Town Manager Act, we're obligated to fill this vacancy within 30 days of Mr. Burns' effective date of resignation, so within 30 days of December 11th. The vacancy must be filled by a majority vote of the remaining members of the board and the town moderator. I'm proposing that the board limit our consideration at this time to former selectmen who are currently resident in the town and who have expressed sufficient willingness and readiness to serve. This appointment will be just over 3 months in duration. With warrant article hearings and a special town meeting upon us, it is essential that our appointee be in a position to assume their duties quickly with minimal need for orientation and onboarding. I also recommend that we state as a preference that any individual who completes Mr. Burns' term do so without intention of standing as a candidate for election to the board. This preference is intended to avoid the potential of a board appointment giving any candidate an unfair advantage. With the board's consent and with the support of our office, I recommend that any interested former selectman submit a written expression of interest and to provide a gauge of willingness and readiness by answering the following 2 questions in their letter or note. 1, on a scale of 0 to 10, how interested are you in filling this vacancy? With 0 equals not interested, which presumably we wouldn't get a letter with a 0. 5 equals willing to serve if appointed, and 10, extremely interested. And 2, on a scale of 0 to 10, how much time are you able to devote to the duties of selectman? 0 equals no time, 5 equals attendance at board meetings, and 10 equals attendance at board meetings, special town meeting, assumption of liaison committee duties, constituent and other correspondence, representation of the board at events, and completion of training programs. On December 18th, this is my current plan, but I'm looking for the board's approval of all of it. I want to make this crystal clear. I'm looking for the board's approval of this process. December 18th, I'll plan to conduct 2 rounds of voting. First, in accordance with the Selectmen's Handbook, I will ask for nominations and a vote to fill the office of Vice Chair. Unlike our typical organizational meeting, I'll preside over this balloting, but we will otherwise utilize the same procedure of opening nominations, closing nominations, and voting. Only the 4 remaining board members will participate in this vote. Second, I will ask for nominations and a vote to fill the vacancy on the board. This will follow a similar procedure as that for the officer vacancy with the following exceptions. The only individuals eligible for nomination will be those former selectmen who have submitted letters of interest as described above, and the moderator shall fully participate in motions and votes relating to the opening and closing of nominations and the ultimate selection of an individual to serve on the board. I respectfully request the board's endorsement of the above procedure prior to my executing it. That is what I have before you.
Can I just ask?
Yes.
And I believe the answer is yes, I just want to clarify it. Is it inherently applied on, regarding the moderator's participation, I understand not in electing vice chair, but in terms of the selection of an individual to serve out the remainder of the term, where it says fully participate in motion and votes, that also allows the moderator in terms of, we have a discussion that if for some reason we're between candidate A and B or A, B, and C, that the moderator can also not just participate in a motion or vote, he also could and should participate in the conversation.
That's, I would anticipate so.
Okay.
But
I
would think so.
That's implied in
You
there
know,
inherently.
I think so.
The way this is worded, you can only vote or make a motion, and my thing is,
Yeah.
can he discuss?
Yeah, I
That's all.
mean, I have to admit that there was one area here which I was a little fuzzy on and could probably use council's clarity. The Town Manager Act says only that the moderator shall participate in the selection, but the selection process itself isn't outlined. So I took that to assume that means a full participation in the selection with motion seconds, opening nominations, closing nominations, discussions, and votes. But
What else would selection mean? Or exclude?
I think the only other thing that might exclude would be if only the 4 remaining members were permitted to make motions and seconds, but the moderator participated in the final vote. But the Manager Act isn't really clear on that, but I assumed that it meant the whole process.
Right.
Yeah. Any comments? Yeah, Mr. Grilli.
Well, unfortunately, as you know, we haven't seen this until right now.
I know,
tonight.
and I apologize for that.
Well, and I apologize for what I'm about to bring up, but as you know, under your direction, I've already polled the
Yep,
former members of the board.
Yep.
So I don't know why it's necessary to re-poll them, whether they're interested. You know, and in terms of the second one, 0 to 10, how much time do you have to give? These are former selectmen, they understand
Yeah,
what kind of time commitment this is.
yeah.
So I would amend, we can do whatever we want, but if we need to do this by the 18th,
Well, my if I'm not, and just to clarify, I know that Mr. Grilli is Dean of the Board, who has served, I think, with just about every single,
well, not all of them, but there's a
well,
couple.
almost every,
Right.
I won't age you too much, did determine where there is interest. And if I'm not mistaken, there, how many
Right.
expressed
So there are
willingness?
currently 10 selectmen who
Yeah.
live in Arlington, former members of this board, who live in Arlington, and I've contacted all 10.
Yeah.
5 of them have expressed they'd be willing to do this, and 5 of them said no, although they're honored that
Yeah.
we would call and ask, but health, life, whatever, you know. I think I can give one example without there being a big problem. Steve Gilligan would have loved to do it, but he's going to be moving.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's not sure exactly of the moving date, but, so, all of them would have loved to have done it and are
Yeah.
honored that they're past selectmen. So, there are 5 that had said, yes, they have the time, they would be willing to do it.
Okay, okay.
I don't know what you want to do with that knowledge, but.
I guess I would say written intent, you know, if they're to submit something saying.
Because it's
you
my
know,
understanding, 5 are willing, but maybe they won't.
Yeah,
Whatever you want to do.
May choose
Yeah.
not to.
yeah.
I mean, okay, I'm sorry, yeah.
I'm sitting here listening. I've also been contacted by John Marr, who was interested.
Yeah.
Now, John's, as you know, he sat through thousands of selectmen's meetings. I think that by limiting it to just the selectmen, it would eliminate someone of his caliber who may prove very helpful to the board. I mean, he understands all our zoning issues, he understands the warrant, he may be a good candidate for us to consider in this as well. You could, instead of saying former selectmen, which may limit it more than the Town Manager Act specifies, which has no limits, we might just say to the general public who has the ability and past experience, worded such that it limits your pool
Yeah.
to those 5, Mr. Marr and anyone else who is experienced with the board but may not have sat here. I mean, there are other folks out there who may be able to do it. And I'm not sure we should really just limit it to the 5 other selectmen.
Great, thank you. Mr. Greeley and then Mr.
But if the town council has something legal to say to that, I don't, are you responding to that point?
If I may, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I just want to make clear that I appreciate the moderator's point from a substantive standpoint in terms of, you know, is there substantive merit to expanding the pool of candidates? The Town Manager Act doesn't say anything about who you appoint. In my mind, you can limit it however you want to limit. And I also want to make clear that what Mr. Curo has suggested is not binding in terms of their later service. If somebody ends up being appointed to this position and then wants to run for selectman, there's nothing the selectman can do to stop that person from running. It's just a mere suggestion that I think the board is trying to make sure that it's not, you know, making a move to prime somebody for the seat, which I think is very wise. But I think the board can limit this however it wants. There's no direction in the Town Manager Act as to who you have to select, even though I understand it's a valuable suggestion. The Manager Act is silent on eligibility. But I think you can limit it as much as you want. If you want to limit it to former selectmen, I think you can do that. I just want to make that clear.
Mr. Dunn?
I definitely, I totally agree that it is our option, but at the same time, if I had my choice, I would actually leave, if it truly was my option, like all the way, I'd just leave this vacant, because I don't, I really want the voters to choose, and unfortunately, the Town Manager Act says shall choose within 30 days, and so I'm going to follow it, and I'm going to do what the Town Manager Act tells me. At the same time, the least controversial, the most, you know, the easiest way to, you know, stay within the Town Manager Act and keep this board moving forward, to me, is you know, someone who I've worked with before. And so that's, I absolutely respect it. I think Mr. Marr would be a great choice. I hope he runs. I
think his point was he doesn't want to run.
Exactly. I understand that. I understand that distinction.
I'm not advocating for him. I'm just putting forth that I was contacted by him. And
I was as well today.
Yeah.
note that, yeah.
Well, and I'm sorry we brought up his name, because now, if he doesn't get it, you know, I feel quite bad about that. I've been contacted by 4 others who are not selectmen, who are interested.
Yep.
So, I don't think we should use names here at this point in time. We're just discussing that particular issue.
Yep. So, Mrs. Mahan?
If I had my druthers, my thing would be that this is open to anyone who's a resident of the town of Arlington that wants to apply for it, stating our preference that A, if you're a former selectman, selectwoman, whatever, that would be one of our preferences perhaps, or definitely. And B, also another one of our preferences is that if you're seeking this to fill the remainder of the term, that, you know, we would expect you would not run for reelection, understanding we couldn't hold that. And to Mr. Greeley's point in terms of, you know, I agree, not bringing up other names. So my thing I would rather say, in accordance with the Town Manager Act, this position is open. We have 30 days to fill it from December 11th. As long as you're a resident of the town of Arlington, you can apply. But we could also state our preference that right now, we certainly would give definitive, strong consideration if A, you're a former selectman, as well as B, you do not plan to run for this seat in April. Recognizing both those caveats, we can't hold anything to. So what I would like to say is, just under the Town Manager Act, we post the opening, people are welcome to apply. We do state that preference, but if you're a unique candidate that doesn't fill A or B, or doesn't fill A, you're not a former selectman, but you definitely fill B, you know, I want to fill the seat and not run for re-election, whether it's, you know, my dad, or, you know, I don't want to say names, my dad would kill me if I said it, but so what I'd like to just say is, you know, let's say this is open, we have to fill it by January 11th. Anyone, as long as you're a resident of the town, you're willing to, you're welcome to apply, but we will state our going in preference if you're a former selectman or selectwoman and/or, preferably and, will not be running for this position in April. That's our preference right now, but.
Okay, so as I'm trying to corral in all of the different points that are made, I understand that the proposed form of notice of intent is probably too complicated or too, I don't know what you want to say, prescriptive or whatnot. That a written notice of intent was suggested by Mr. Dunn. Ms. Mahan has suggested that this be open to all residents of the town with a stated preference for former selectmen
And/or.
and someone who does not intend to run for the seat in the spring. Am I summarizing everybody's kind of input on this correctly? No. I missed
Yes,
one.
you are overall, but I haven't commented yet.
Sure.
I believe we should stay to, it should be a former selectman, period. The reason there are many qualified people out there, there's no question, who could do this, who have been involved with town meeting, who have been involved with warrant articles, finance committee, there's so many that possibly could do it. I believe a selectman has done it, has sat in these seats, and further, the people of Arlington at one point chose these 10 individuals in particular to sit in that seat. So I would move that, I would encourage that we do limit it. And now we add time constraints as well, you know, to getting this done. So, I mean, I'll go with the board, and I don't want to close it to citizens, but I'm just trying to be practical here. And as I say, the people at one point chose those former selectmen to sit in one of these seats. They're already trained, there's no question.
Yeah, I mean, when I was putting this together as kind of a straw man proposal, I had thought about this issue of more citizens and possibly a ranked order of criteria. We consider former selectmen first, then we consider former town officials first who have had are members of other reporting boards. It's very complicated, and I do agree with I do agree with the points that have been raised here, that former selectmen have been elected to this position. They do know it, and I think that holds some weight, especially on something like this. And I think that any appointment that we make is going to be sensitive anyways. And I think it's going to be viewed through, no matter what we do on this, let's be real, it's going to be viewed through a critical lens, probably, from someone, from some corner. And I absolutely agree. I wish the town manager, I'm almost tempted to say that we should file a warrant article this year, if I had my druthers, with only 3 months left, we'd just leave it vacant and we'd finish the business on our own. But we don't have that luxury. So I would defer towards only former selectmen. I've put an aggressive timetable here for the next meeting for this selection to be made. So my personal view is that if that's call it a failed selection process, let's say we can't get a majority, or for some reason some of the folks who said that they were willing have decided, you know what, maybe I'm not as interested in this. If for some reason we can't get a selection on the 18th, I think that with Mr. Byrne giving us the 11th, it gives us one more shot on January 8th to go out and post for others and open it up. So it's in essence, it's a two-step. It's potentially a two-step process if we were a hung board for lack of a.
I just have a procedural, legal town manager act question. Can we legally, this Board of Selectmen, majority thereof, say, if you are not a former selectman, you need not apply? Because what I'm saying is, I feel the way I read the Town Manager Act, we have to fill it in 30 days. It's open to everyone as long as you're citizens in the town. We can only say what our preference is, but what I may be mishearing from my colleagues is, we want to take it one step further to say, if you're not a former selectman, you cannot apply, you cannot be considered. And my thing is, I don't think we can say that. If you tell me we can do that, then I'm all set with it. But I think under the Town Manager Act, and the way I interpret it, the vacancy starts December 11th. It needs to be filled by January 11th. I think in my interpretation of the Town Manager Act, this board or majority of the board can state their preference, but I think legally, we can't say, if you're not a former selectman, you cannot apply, you cannot be considered.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Tell me if I'm wrong, and I won't ask anything else on it. That's my only concern.
So what the Town Manager Act says, just for, as you folks say, the millions who are watching at home, is when a vacancy occurs among the selectmen for any reason, other than expiration of term, the remaining selectman and the moderator, within 30 days after such vacancy occurs, shall appoint another selectman to fill the vacancy until the next town election, at which point the voters shall elect a selectman for the remainder of the unexpired term. It doesn't provide any other criteria, and I suppose what I'm trying to say is that I think that you have the authority to run a selection process the way that you want. I don't think it's saying that you, I guess the very simple answer is, I think if you want to say these are our criteria, I think that's okay. I think you have the authority to do that, because the only thing it's requiring you to do is to appoint somebody. I don't think that it's requiring, a public posting in the way that, we traditionally would do things. I think that you do have the authority to say, this is how we're going to make this appointment, particularly given the sort of crunch. It's the only direction it's giving you is to make an appointment.
And that's what I'm saying. But my question is, I feel, my interpretation of the Town Manager Act, we can only state a preference. We can't preclude anybody from running, as long as you're a legit citizen of the town of Arlington. We can state our preference, it's a former selectman, but that's my only thing. And if you tell me we can do that, which I don't think we can, I think we can state our preference and say this is the guideline and the standard we're going to hold people to. But I think we can't tell anyone, as long as you're a citizen of the town of Arlington, that you have to be a citizen and a former selectman. I think, but if you can tell me.
I'm not trying to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Ms. Mahan, I'm not trying to equivocate here. What I'm saying is that it's very, very sparse language. If you but it's not an elected office. We're not putting some sort of criteria in who's allowed to run for office. It's the selectmen making an appointment. And if somebody wants to apply for this or wants to, say, I'd like to be considered for selectman, I don't think there's anything that you can do to stop them
That's
from
what I'm saying, because I'm hearing from my colleagues that, no, we're telling, and it may be my misinterpretation, if you're not a former selectman, you need not apply. What I'm saying is, anyone can apply for this, but our stated preference is.
I guess that my suggestion would be, given that concern, is that it is what Mr. Curo, that you basically say, we're hoping to get applications from former selectmen, that's who we're inviting to do this. If somebody else puts in an application, I think the board is welcome to consider it, but I also think that it's okay for the board to say, we're really inviting and hoping that former selectmen will do it.
Do you see mine?
Yeah. Can I just say one thing squarely, and then I'll say, I mean, I see it as, it's a resolution of the board. It's a resolution of the board that this is, could I recognize Mr. Greeley, and then I'll.
I apologize. Well, I just want to say, look, we're interviewing for a position. We can set the qualifications as we see them. I can say, in order to appoint a new town manager, we want that town manager to have had at least 2 years' experience. If we're appointing a new controller, we can say, I want to make sure that controller has had 5 years' experience in municipal finance. That's all. In other words, I believe we can. We're not saying you can't do something. We're saying here's the qualifications we're looking for this job. But if I may make one final point, Dan, let it go, because now it's sounding like we want to exclude people. That's not in any way, shape, or form the intention here, at least on my part. Sorry, Dan.
No, I interrupted Joe and I interrupted you, and I apologize for that.
You're welcome to move up here if you like.
Seat's
You're
still
feeling
warm.
lonely over there.
The seat's still warm.
Yeah.
So I don't think, I don't feel legally bound, and I don't feel politically bound, but at the same time, Mrs. Mahan clearly feels passionate about this, and I don't think it's a distinction without a difference, and so I'm totally fine with it. So say we get two former selectmen and 50 other people who apply, which isn't going to happen. I'm still going to pick who I said I'm going to pick, unless, the most amazing person suddenly just appears and I'm like, oh, of course. But I don't anticipate it. So I don't see a downside. And so unless you can bring one for me, Joe, that's where I am.
So, yeah, I do see, so let me.
I think it was said before, under the critical eye, which this board, all of our town boards are now by certain elements in the town, we'd be best served to leave it open to everybody and then say our preferences are.
Yeah.
And these will be our order of ranking, and leave it at that. Don't say we're only going to accept from selectmen. Just leave it open and say, when we're going to decide, we're going to look at the selectmen first, and then people, like you said, other critical people. And we're achieving the same end. People know we're looking at a former selectman or someone who has extremely detailed knowledge of the workings of the board, whoever that may be. It's probably a former selectman, true. And you're not going to get 50 other people, as Dan says. We're going to get 4 or 5 people, and that's going to be it. But I don't see the benefit to the town and our political image out there that we're hand-picking, which, no, people come to us and we're going to say it's one of these guys.
I think,
gals.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Murder. I think the point is well taken. I'll only play devil's advocate on one, because there's one aspect of this that I left silent in the memo, and I really wanted up for discussion. I addressed here the opening nomination for nominations, closing nominations, and voting. I guess what I had envisioned is, if we're looking at let's be frank. If we have a parade of folks in front of us, essentially interviewing in a public forum like this, it's a very embarrassing thing for those who are not selected. And part of my thinking with former selectmen is they're known quantities. And for me, at least, I think that a written notice of intent would be sufficient to evaluate them, because we know they've been elected by the voters and they've served here. If we do open it up wider into a greater pool of folks who are not known to us, I think that we almost have an obligation to have a parade of folks standing at the microphone and making their case to us. You disagree?
I wouldn't think so. I think whoever's going to apply should give us a written notice that they're interested, what their qualifications are. And the board administrator gives us a ballot, and we vote on who we want that night. I don't see the need for ad nauseum interviews. We know everybody. Let's face it, we know who the 5 are, or we know who they will be when they stand up. We're all familiar with the past, and I don't see the need for interviews, frankly.
I've now attempted to interrupt everybody in this room tonight.
Go for it.
I'm sorry.
You've been successful too, Mr. Dunn.
I'm really sorry about that. I understand what Joe, that you're concerned about, but it is on the applicant to make that choice. I guess one of the things we've been saying, resident of Arlington, I think we all also assume that they'd be an adult, and it's up to them if somebody really wants, like we're saying, we're going to point. We've said we plan on appointing from one of these 5 or 10 people, and if someone comes from outside that pool and says, no, you really should do it for me, it's on them to make that case, and if they don't get chosen, this is the big leagues.
So how do you, as my colleagues, envision this though? Do you envision us asking for any applicant to appear before us that night?
They certainly should if they think, if they are making a case, then of course they should be here.
Okay. And we accept what, 3-minute statement?
I just don't think I think you're,
okay.
Yeah, you're premature optimization.
Premature optimization.
It's a software engineering term.
My thing is that being the purist and at the risk of ticking off most, if not all of my colleagues and then some, the purist to me in terms of the process is it's open, we let people know. I understand, the chairman asked one of my colleagues to contact. If I had my druthers, that wouldn't have happened, and there's nothing ill towards that happening, because it kind of adds a level of expectation of the 10, 5 yes, 5 no. My thing would be, but we're not at that right now, so my thing would be, it's open, everyone's welcome to apply, this is our stated preference, please submit your letter of interest, it can be 1, 2, 3 sentences, you can do a CV or a resume, and then that night, whenever our next meeting is, we determine that anyone, if you sent your letter of interest, you're also welcome to come that night, but you don't necessarily have to. But we'll have the names before us, and as we've done in some other things, Mrs. Kropelka, will have the names, and we can basically rank them, or we can, get guidance from the chairman in terms of vote 1, 2, 3, vote your number 1, whatever, because we've done this in the past with town manager candidates. So my thing would be, just submit your letter of interest. If you want to come that night too, that's great. But I don't want to get it into that we have a defined pool, and then we also have it that we've pretty much made our decision before we even get to the next meeting, because we're trying to figure out who's you know what I mean? We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We are where we are. So if you said, Mrs. Baham, what do you want? It's open. Everyone's welcome to apply. Our stated preference is a former selectman, as well as you're not going to run for the seat in April. Recognizing we can't control either one of those, but that's our stated preference. All you have to do, whether you fit our preference or not, submit a letter of interest, if you want to add anything else. And then that night, the chairman with Mrs. Kropelka will, put a ballot, and then maybe we have a discussion that night that we just do on number 1, or we do on 1 and 2, or 1 and 2 and 3, and we go from there, recognizing that those ballots are public records. So if anyone says, I want to see the 4, 5 ballots, they can. But I'm trying to minimize, anyone, I don't want to say with hard feelings, but I'm trying to think how we do it. Here's where we are right now. Ideally, because right now we have 5 selectmen, former selectmen, who say, yeah, I'm willing to do it, and I'm like, are we running the risk of ticking off 4? But you know what, we are where we are, so. But what do you think on that, anyone else?
I just want to be clear, what are you talking about ballots? I mean, how can you make how can I write a ballot if I don't know who's been nominated? Doesn't the nomination have to be a public statement?
Won't we get the letters of
No, we
intent
get the letter
beforehand?
of interest, and you know who the 5 former selectmen are, or maybe it's only 3 former selectmen.
So now
Or we
we
can
get-
do something else.
We
can
get
do-
5 names on a ballot. Now what do? We got 5 different names.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wait. We have
What I'm
5,
saying is,
5 equal votes, 5 different names on that ballot. Now what do?
what I'm saying is because 10 have been contacted, 5 say they want to do it, I'm making the incorrect assumption that those 5 are going to say, I'm going to write a letter of interest.
Right.
So the Board of Selectmen should know, the full board, who the 5 former selectmen.
right.
So we have that before us, and from that, either, I'm only saying ranking, because I don't want anyone to say, you've already made the decision, so you know who is the one person that you're nominating, and you're not nominating the other 4. So I'm saying if we have the names before us, we could either rank them, or if someone wants to make a motion from the 5.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan.
I think we do it just the same way we did when we had the vacancy on the assessor, which is we had at least 2 and maybe 3 candidates, and when it just came to the voting time, the clerk, sorry, Marie.
That's fine.
The Kropelka.
Kropelka.
Said, okay, Mr. Dunn, what's your vote? And I said, Mr. Kira, what's your vote? And then we go through it, and the Town Manager Act does specify, the majority of ballots of the officers entitled to vote shall be necessary to get to such appointment, which is to say that we have to get to 3.
Right.
And so if it comes to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, we're gonna have to sit around, we're gonna have to have a chat, and we're gonna have to figure somebody out. But if it comes out, 2 to 2 to 1, then we're gonna look at the person who said 1 and be like, maybe, and I think we just, I don't think, and honestly, I don't think it's gonna be that. I do think we're overthinking this. I don't think it's gonna be that hard.
Can I sit at the big kids' table during the discussion?
Yes, you can.
I agree.
Can I make one suggestion?
Yes, Mr. Hine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just make sure that we have a date by which we're going to receive these letters of intent approved by this board.
Yeah, I would,
Monday.
I'd like to recommend, the Wednesday before the meeting, or the Thursday before the meeting?
No, it's gotta be by next Monday,
Next Monday.
don't you think? Because now we all need to get the information of who's applied.
So you want Monday the 11th?
Monday, the 11th, not this coming Monday, Monday, the 11th.
That is this.
That
That
is
is
this coming Monday.
Oh, that is this coming Monday.
Today's the 4th.
Because it's the following Monday, we say we're gonna appoint the
That's fine.
person.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
would you entertain a motion?
I would love a motion. I'd be very entertained.
All right, I move that we ask the board administrator to make a general announcement that we have a vacancy of the Board of Selectmen, that the selectmen are accepting applications for that position, and we require a written application, or like written notice of intent with any, supporting documents that they so choose, by close of business of Monday, the 11th, that the selectmen will intend to make a choice, and joined by the moderator, intend to make a choice on December 18th in an open meeting, that our criteria are that we are looking for, adult resident of Arlington, who, our preferences for someone who has been a selectman before and who does not intend to run again.
Second.
I think that's pretty clean.
Yeah, I think we just wanna add specifically term to expire, whatever the election is.
April
Fill an
7th?
unexpired term of,
April 7th?
yeah.
At 5 PM or whatever, 4 PM?
The only tweak to the language, I'm wondering if legally we have to make, you said adult resident, but I presume it has to be the registered voter.
Why?
Does it? I don't know.
I don't know that they can.
I don't know.
I think they just have to have proof of residence.
It's just proof of residency, yep.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that?
Oh,
Oh,
no.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Believe it or not, that was easier than I expected.
I don't believe it.
One other suggestion?
Yeah.
Do it at the beginning of the meeting, not the end.
But we wanted
did have the
Steve to be
Stephen
able to.
say.
Yeah, we did it.
We wanted Steve to be able to be at the meeting up until this discussion.
I
The next one.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'll be a
'cause-
short-
yeah,
we're
that'll be a
hoping for a
short
short
meeting,
meeting.
yeah.
Now, when are you gonna, bring Steve back for his
But
on?
please be aware that it's at 6 o'clock that evening.
Oh, and the 18th is at 6 o'clock? Oh, good, okay.
It's 6 weeks approximately.
Oh, okay.
We're not
Could
sure.
Let me know?
We'll let you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we now move on to correspondence received. Property damage at 235 Gray Street, John and Francis Catelli, 235 Gray Street. Arlington Libraries Foundation Annual Appeal, Karen Varnick Barrett, Chair, Arlington Libraries Foundation. And a request to extend no parking section and add speed limit sign on Winter Street, Barbadosha, 45 Columbia Road. Do I have a motion for receipt? Moved by Ms. Mahan. Have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Greeley. Are there any referrals that members would like to make?
I'd recommend, if the board's so inclined, is to recommend the first and third to me.
First
I
and
can
third?
dispatch them to the proper departments.
Hearing no objection, we will refer the first and third to the manager. Any further discussion on any of these? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. We now move on to new business. Ms. Kapelka.
Just reminding everyone that tomorrow, the warrant is opening for the annual town meeting.
Yeah.
And then on, tomorrow is Tuesday, Wednesday, it's opening from 8 to 4 for the special town meeting. So we have 2 busy days.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hyman.
I have a gentle reminder that you are now a quorum of 2 for the purposes of the open meeting law. There are 4 of you, so 2 of you is a quorum.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't have a phone conversation?
I think that you have to have keep your conversations to administrative business.
To
administrative business.
Okay.
But you can feel free to call me about anything and make sure that it's, proper to discuss among 2 of you.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman. Ms. Chaplin.
I have no new business.
Mr. Greeley.
Wow.
That's new business, baby.
Wow. No, just, I was thinking that it might be necessary for us to call a special meeting, but I no longer believe that's necessary.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley. Ms. Mahan.
2 things, just want to, along with my colleagues, the town manager, Mrs. Kapelka, and town council, wish best good luck to the Pop Warner A Squad, which is 12 to 14-year-old, happens to be all-girl team, who made it to nationals. They're leaving on December 7th, competing on December 9th down at Disney for national title. I am not going because of, there are 6 coaches, so now there are 4 going. I am the least needed of any, plus my family circumstances. I would love to go, but I want to wish them good luck. Then they've always been appreciative of this Board of Selectmen and ancillary characters, always supporting them, and I hope they just have a great time, because that's, last time I went with the team that I was coaching, we were just so thrilled to be there. We didn't care if we came in 15th, because we were competing against 14 other. We were just like, yeah, rock on, it's great. And I think because we were so loosey-goosey, it helped us get first. So it'd be great if they get first too, but they're already first in all of our hearts. And then my second point of new business, and it may not even be a point I should be making, but I would like to ask through the chair to the town manager, just because we're all getting questions, not only around the high school, but especially the Gibbs School, some people call it the other middle school. Is there any sort of pertinent information that you can give us as a quick update, or should that happen at another meeting?
With the chair's indulgence, I'd be happy to give a brief update on the status. So the Gibbs project to build the townwide 6th grade, as the board is aware, started several months ago and is scheduled to open for the September of 2018. It is currently still on schedule. There has been a number of change orders that are larger than what we had anticipated that have been presented to the Permanent Town Building Committee, but we are still within budget and still have contingency remaining. We're not feeling as good as we did at the start of the project with that contingency, but still feel confident that the project can be completed within the budget as allocated. What's really in quick form, what's happened is there's been a number of unexpected conditions as windows have been pulled off or walls have been pulled down that weren't discovered with the invasive testing that was performed. But given that it's a near 100-year-old building, some of these things are not entirely surprising that they were present. Just the quantity and scope of them was more than expected. That said, the team, the construction team, the architect team, the OPM, and the team of the PTBC has really done a great job of keeping things on schedule. So even with those impacts, the schedule is still planning to be met, and there's no concern about the school opening on time right now.
Thank you, and that's a big thing I wanted to hear, because we've been getting calls about all these other ancillary things, but everything's still on schedule, and as of right now.
So, I will mention, so we both leaflet the neighborhood monthly with an update, as well as email out via the town notices an update on the project that the OPM team puts together. So if anybody is looking for that information, it is readily available on the website.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dunn?
Nothing.
Okay, I just have one matter of new business, and I hope you'll indulge me because I actually wrote it because I didn't want to miss anything. You know, in wishing our colleague Stephen well, I quoted Ecclesiastes to everything there's a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. And this season is a season of reflection, and every 3 years for me, a time for personal discernment. There are 4 pillars in my life: faith, family, career, and community. And I'll say that the earth beneath each of these pillars has shifted recently. This past year, my daughters and I have taken a fork in the road in our faith journey, joining a new religious community where we've devoted increasing amounts of time to parish life. On the family front, we're beginning a year of college searches for our oldest daughter, and seeing the beginnings of the inevitable needs of aging parents. In terms of career, my organization is undergoing a major transformation, requiring enhanced attention to the dozen staff members who report to me and to the budget for which I'm responsible. Which brings me to community. This community is the pillar which, in so many ways, supports the burden of the other 3. I am blessed to live in a community which offers such a diversity of opportunities for spiritual fulfillment, a great school system and safe environment in which to raise my family, and a place of refuge after a long day at work. I've served nearly a decade in townwide elected office, 4 years across Mass Avenue on school committee, and 6 more here. And I've spent the last weeks in long conversations with my extended family and closest friends, including my supporters and others who care deeply about Arlington. Our conversations have centered on the question of my seeking the approval of Arlington voters for 3 more years of service. And during this time, I did something else which has factored greatly into my thinking. On Thursday, I joined Mr. Greeley and the Selectones at the Chamber of Commerce's First Light celebration in the center. On Saturday, I attended a similar event in the Heights, which was hosted by ACMi. Both events were completely overrun by families with young children, mostly aged between infancy and 7 years old. And I'll say that at ACMi, I was incredibly moved by 2 little girls who approached Santa Claus holding each other's hands. They contrasted greatly in outward appearance. One child was a fair-skinned, freckle-faced redhead, while the other child was of much darker complexion, possibly of South Asian ancestry. And with big smiles on their faces, they told Santa that their one wish for Christmas was to be sisters, real sisters. Now, nothing could better sum up what we're here for. We're here to fight for Arlington's future and for a community where we can all live as brothers and sisters, regardless of who our parents are. The little children I saw on Thursday and Saturday were so innocent, readily placing their trust in the loving adults around them. And while they certainly don't know it, they're also relying on us. We, as leaders of the town, need to make the case on their behalf for continued fiscal stability and taxpayer support so that their schools remain strong and they're educated in facilities that we can all be proud of. With so many crucial decisions ahead of us in the next 2 years, other life pressures notwithstanding, I cannot in good conscience walk away from that commitment. So I'm therefore announcing that I will be a candidate for re-election to the Board of Selectmen this spring, and I hope to have the opportunity to continue serving with all of you. Thank you. And with that, I will accept the motion for adjournment.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, all those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
All opposed? This meeting is adjourned. The next meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be on December 18th at 6 PM. Thank you.